Hello! It's Thursday night, and we've been cast away to an island. And we're asking a question that everybody asks each and every week. And you know what that question is? It's, hey, did you see this one? People of Earth, or if you're alone on a single island looking into the last moments of your phone as it's about to die, that would be what sort of the modern update would be, is he would have his phone instead of just a flashlight, I think.
Yeah, and they'd be watching an old episode that they downloaded because there'd be absolutely no internet signal on this island.
It is Thursday night, like the wonderful announcer just said, and we are talking Castaway. Now, it is Steve's final week of his birthday month, so he is your host tonight. But before we get to that, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Jason, and Kaylin as always, and we have Tim here this week. Steve, take it away.
Whoa, that was fast. Welcome back, Tim. Tim joined us. Thank you for having me. Yeah, of course. Anytime.
I'll get a soundboard someday, and then I'll be able to do like a cheering sound.
Great. I look forward to that. So as I think people have guessed, we are doing the movie Castaway, starring Tom Hanks. Ah, God, I fucked it up already. And this movie is directed by Robert Zemeckis, one of America's horniest directors. Surprisingly, not as horny in Castaway. You'd think it would be a little bit more horny. But this movie came out in the year 2000, I believe.
Yeah, that blew my mind, actually. I thought this movie came out in 1996.
It was also the final banger of Robert Zemeckis before he went down into a weird CGI hole in the ground and never really fully pulled himself out. He's still down there.
Did he make that
I'm pretty sure there's a couple handful of ones afterwards.
Oh, what, like Beowulf?
Oh yeah.
Or how about A Christmas Carol? Or Welcome to Morrowind? Or the Witches remake? Or that god-awful Pinocchio movie that came out not too long ago?
No, isn't that a good movie? Isn't the new the live-action Pinocchio?
The one directed by Guillermo del Toro, it rips to all hell in heaven, but the Zemeckis Pinocchio was so painful I turned it off before they got to the Donkey Island.
Before they got to the
it was like
of it all.
Pretty similar to the original cartoon of it,
which I didn't really like either. So I was like, why are they remaking this? Well, a very funny fact about that movie is that Tom Hanks does not sing, and he refused to sing in probably one of the most famous Disney songs. It's like the Disney song that plays at the beginning of every Disney movie, like When I Wish Upon a Star. So he did a spoken.
Supposed to sing that, isn't he?
No, Geppetto sings it.
Does he?
That's why the blue fairy is I gotta come down and bring this puppet to life for this old man.
Was it Geppetto in the cartoon that sang it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I always thought it was Jiminy Cricket, but
I'm sure Joseph Gordon-Levitt would have sang if they asked him to. But so basically Tom Hanks does like a spoken word rendition of When I Wish Upon a Star, and it's like a real William Shatner style performance, except he has a harsh Italian accent.
Yeah, Jiminy Cricket sings it in the original.
Are you sure? Why would...
That's what I thought. Yeah.
He's sitting by the windowsill singing to the star so that he can bring.
I thought he prays or something.
Yeah, he does pray.
And then because Jiminy is like narrating.
Maybe it's a thing where they both sing, but I'm pretty sure Geppetto sings it.
Regardless.
Also, it's a shitty movie. You should never watch it. But it's not a shitty movie. Castaway, starring Tom Hanks.
I agree with you there. You're not wrong.
Yeah. I think the movie that comes directly after this movie is The Polar Express, which got roasted hard in that Chippendale movie that came out not too long ago.
Oh yeah, that was funny. Yeah.
But yeah, oh god, my foot. I just cramped up because I'm sitting cross-legged like a creep. But yeah, why don't we go right into the, our beginning procedures of the podcast, which is letting us all describe our history with the movie Castaway. And Tim, because it is your first time returning in a long time, why don't you take it away for us as a guest here?
Well, I believe I was like 16 going on 17 when the movie came out. And though I would like to think I was a very sharp kid, watching it this time now, I was kind of realizing what I was missing before in the first watch. And because like I was catching on to the whole reality of surviving on an island and how well it's depicted in the film. But there was a lot of other themes that absolutely flew past my head as a kid, and rewatching it now was actually an interesting experience. I'll probably get into it later on. I won't toss it all up now. But the one thing that is still kind of interesting to notice now that kind of captured me at that time was even though Robert Zemeckis has all sorts of funny things about him, still a very, very good technical director where there's a lot of nice lead-ins and I was thinking about what a wonderful time it was to not have shaky cam for everything. So to be able to watch a movie, a visual medium, was something else. But
yeah, a modern remake of this would be like Bar Factory. Like it would just be shaky cam uncontrollably the entire time.
But so yeah, like that's pretty well all my history with it was I enjoyed it at the time, but I think because of how much it was satirized in like pop culture, like there'd be like crap in like the MTV Movie Awards and all sorts of commercials after that, because it was a successful movie in the theaters.
Very successful, yeah.
Yeah, in those quaint terms of like where it makes 30 million in a weekend, where that's considered successful.
But I mean, it was also one of those movies that continuously like sort of doubled its box office for like months or weeks and weeks after that. Similar to like a Titanic situation where its budget was 90 million, but at the end of the day, its final run was $429.6 million, which is for 2000 money. That's pretty good.
That's Star Wars money right there.
Yeah, that's some Avengers level
for a $90 million movie. Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, but that's pretty well sums up my history with it, and so I got a lot of it as a teenager, but seeing it now as a 39-year-old human was a very different experience that I appreciated a lot.
You're telling me you were a 39-year-old human? Wait, you're not an anthropomorphized volleyball that I imagine talking to on the text all the time? Very good. Thank you for that. I will, I agree that like he is like a masterful filmmaker. I want to get into it more, but like I think one of his biggest strengths is that he's like the master of setup and payoff. And we will get into it as a discussion on how it goes. But like I watched it again today, and I was like, not just pleasure watching it. I was like, nope, man, watching it. And I was like, Jesus Christ, the amount of shit that he sets up at the beginning of the movie that pays off, like bookends the other end of the movie. It's so cool. Jason, why don't you go next for us here?
To the point that like he sets so many things up that I didn't remember that I was like, what's the point of like the woman in Russia with the adultery? What's the point of showing this farm? Like I didn't remember the ending to this movie at all, but that's because when this movie came out, I was like 15. Yeah. Probably watched it with my mom. Me and my mom would like rent movies on the weekend. I perceive myself as being much younger when I originally watched it, but I guess I was kind of more age appropriate. I thought this movie came out in like 1997. That's how I remember it. As far as my history with it, that's just it. I watched it then, and kind of just it. It was one of those movies that like people would talk about and stuff, and it is very much a "Hey, did you see this one?" style movie, where people are like, yeah, Castaway, that movie's awesome, But it was never like on TV at like a house party the way a lot of those movies. You know what I mean?
Let's just
like,
hook on Castaway and put on some like lo-fi beats and see if it matches up.
Let's all take fucking mushrooms and see if we can match up.
Dark Side of the Eggs.
But not Dark Side of the Moon. No, we've done that already. We'll listen to.
It would be like, what's that song like? And then they went to Atlantis. Is that guy Donovan or whatever?
Also, to our conversation earlier, I think that the fairy godmother may actually sing the song in the new movie. So
it's in the new movie. Geppetto does a spoken word rendition of it.
Oh, okay. Because I
watched it pretty recently, and I was like, ugh.
She did record it. It is recorded, so it may show up several times in the movie.
Well, she does sing it as well when she appears.
Yeah.
So, could be that it's sung multiple times in the movie. I don't freaking remember.
That's what I just said.
Okay, continue.
That's it. I watched it. I watched it when it came out, and I fucking loved it. And then I never saw it. I never watched it again until now, till literally today.
I think that's a lot of people's experiences because, like you said, it also wasn't really played on TV a whole lot.
No,
I think because of the runtime, it's like super
long.
It's
a 2.5 hour movie. It's not like me and Steve, you and I talk about this all the time about how like a 90-minute action movie will take up a 3-hour chunk on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
You know, like they might have shown a cut for time version of this on like Fox or TBS or something.
And if you flip to like TBS and it's just a silent Tom Hanks fucking around with coconuts for 20 minutes, people are going to flip to Independence Day on another channel and be like, whoa, Will Smith just punched an alien.
Yeah. Welcome to Earth.
Yeah. But he slapped him.
Also, I want to clear something up about Welcome to Earth. That's racist. He says Welcome to Earth perfectly enunciated. I just want to I learned that.
Did any of us say otherwise?
No. I learned that this week that whenever I always hear people say Welcome to Earth, he doesn't say that. He says
mostly
Welcome
to white
Earth.
Men say that.
Oh, do you know where I realized that from? I know we weren't supposed to tangent, but that new Red Letter Media where they're talking about Mars attacks, they show a clip of Welcome to Earth. Anyway.
Right.
Kalen.
that was one of those. I just wanted to say that was one of those things that people would say, and I was always, because I watched Independence Day all the time as a kid. I'm like, he doesn't say Earth, guys. He
doesn't say Earth.
You're being racist.
Being racist, and you're being obtuse. Quite frankly.
Yeah. Even as a teenager, I'm like, we just watched it together, like yesterday afternoon. He did not say
this
Earth.
Movie's on every day after school. I don't know why you keep doing that.
It's on every day. 2 times a day on the Superstation.
I was going to say on TBS. Yeah. It's going to have the 24-hour marathon where he does not say Earth once.
Yeah, on July 4th, they just play Independence Day over and over and over and over and over again. Sorry, Kalen, go ahead and tell us about your first experience with the movie Castaway starring Tom Hanks, directed by Robert Zemeckis.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you. Just to add on to what you guys are saying, this is a very good movie, but it's not the kind of movie that, like, there's some movies where I could rewatch it like immediately afterwards or multiple times in a month, multiple times in a year. This movie is very good, but it doesn't exactly have that replayability, like just because of the weightiness and the long stretches of it's subtle. There's subtleties to it. But all that being said, I saw this movie when it came out. I think in theaters. Because we used to go to movies a lot, like we do Family Day or whatever on Sundays and go see movies. But like there isn't anything that really stands out too much from when I first saw it. Also, to add on to what you were saying, Tim, like I was younger at the time, and watching it now, I had a better appreciation for it. I'm a more, matured and developed, human brain or whatever. And there's other things going on that I could relate to more so now. So it almost felt like I haven't seen it in a while either. And so it almost kind of felt like a first watch this past week. And then I also watched the commentary to learn some inside scoops on some few things that we'll talk about as well. But yes, that was my first time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I had a similar experience to you guys. I did not see it in theaters. This is more of like a movie that my mom would want to watch kind of thing. So it was rented. but we were also at a cottage when we rented it, so we watched it on a teeny tiny little screen, boob tube television. But in my mind, I watched it in a theater. You know, like the impact of everything that's happening in this movie is like so grand that my brain translated it to like me seeing it in theaters. And then I really had to think, I'm like, I didn't see this in theaters. I saw it on a tiny television in a cottage. like this. So the summer after it was released in theaters or whatever. Right. And I believe it was like the cottage that we had a friend of the family, and like they would let us rent their cottage every once in a while. And it was like this really big, nice cottage. So we would often invite other family friends to join us, and I think Durac's family was there as well, and he watched it with us. Durac. And we were sitting at this like sort of almost like conference style table of like both of our families on either side, just like watching, like we were like all like taking notes, being like, I think this is going to be a huge hit. It's like, yeah, it already was.
It's on VHS.
Was this a double VHS?
I don't think so. I don't think it was long enough to be a double. I don't remember having to pause the tape and put in a new one.
Yeah.
It's 143 minutes, which is, over 2 hours. It's just under 2.5. But I think once movies start to hit the 2.5 hour mark, that's when they gotta put that other tape in there. Otherwise, it's like otherwise the VHS is so thick that if you even leave it in the sun for 5 minutes, it will actually explode in your house. Like, there was tape everywhere. Kind of like in this movie.
That could be used for taping up a
You
raft.
can use that to if you don't have rope, use tape.
I have a sort of Mandela effect memory that the first time that he tries to send the boat, it explodes. That might just be from another
fire.
Movie. No, like it just falls apart immediately. But I think
that might be because of the end when it's falling apart when he's on it, and like other movies that have similar scenes. Like there's also actual Mandela effects for this movie that I kind of briefed over when looking through the Wikipedia, and I was like, are you fucking serious? People are so stupid. They misremember something and they're like, Mandela
effect. Do you know what it sounds like, Steve? Do you know what it sounds like? Do you know what it sounds like, Steve? It sounds like a cash grab.
Cash grab.
So it's good to put little notes of when we are in our videos, and that's
also, I'm going to get it out of the way now. No title shout out.
No time.
Yeah, he's like, I can't believe I was cast away for 4 years.
Speaking of that, I relentlessly.
Hey, I'm not done talking about my first time watching yet.
Sorry, my bad, Steve.
Jesus Christ. I do want to say that like I remember being very emotional during this movie. It spooked me. It made me like sort of like cringy at times, and the anticipation of things kind of like overwhelmed me. But I did like remember having a huge frog in my throat and being like, don't cry at that moment where his best friend on the island is like slowly being taken away by the sea. So I do remember my first time watching this. It was like super impactful, but I again, like you guys, I don't think I ever really sought it out to watch it again ever, because I remember being like distraught by it, where I'm like, that movie is very stressful, very like racking on your emotions, and like just difficult to get through. But this watch through, I was like, this is maybe one of those rare like perfect movies, like a Jurassic Park, or like I'm like there's a million you can name, but like I have a very small list of movies that I sit through and I'm like held the entire time.
They're
by
good
what's
every
happening
time,
on screen.
Yeah. I watched Jurassic Park. I watched all three of the first Jurassic Parks about 2 weeks ago, and Jurassic Park and this both had the same. It's like a hug the whole time of good filmmaking. Like the beats are well done. Like the pacing is well done.
I think that's the main thing, is that this movie has like maybe perfect pacing. Like he figured out exactly when to cut things and how long to linger on things.
The other thing though is when the movie magic's seamless.
Hold on, you guys are both talking at the same time.
I would just say the three acts are clearly defined. Like it's very distinct.
God, it's like yeah. There's actually almost like 4 acts in this movie, to be honest. Because that end chunk, I remember it being like he gets off the plane and then the movie is over. But it's like, no, there's like still almost 40 minutes left in the movie.
Yeah.
What were we gonna say, Kalen?
I was gonna say that one of the things that I think I have kind of discovered after watching this movie is when the movie magic is seamless, it's a great movie.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of like really great magic tricks in this movie that like while watching it I was like, I remember this exact shot perfectly, and when it came on the screen I was like, yep, that's exactly how I remember it from, you know, a billion years ago when I watched it for the first time ever. It's like every single sort of like nuance of that shot is like burned into my memory.
When
And-
they
Mhm.
like, especially when he hits his leg on the coral, that was exactly the way I remembered it. Like weird, like all the colors were the same. Like this movie, I watched it on Crave, so it's probably only 720p, and a lot of it looked almost the way that it looked like on my TV because the aspect ratio wasn't stretched. It didn't look like it was cleaned up at all. So it really felt like I was watching it in that old way. The only thing I think that made me a little bit crazy was this is from that era where like there's not a lot of CGI in this movie, but it comes from that era where they mostly nailed down showing things in CGI and the things look good, but eyes have a horrible uncanny valley, and when that whale comes up and it's like blinking and looking at him, I was like, oh god, that's
and
like,
that was the first time that Robert Zemeckis is like, I could probably do a whole movie.
yeah,
like this.
yeah.
With the fucked up
Nothing but eyes. Nothing but eyes.
It's gonna be a whole whale made of eyes.
I mean,
right now.
that would have been a choice, but
I gotta say though, there's like the movie is so good that you can't even really complain about it. There's lots of green screen.
Yeah.
The day for night is always rough. Like it never really works. You can always tell when it's happening, but I understand why they had to do it in a movie like this. Almost every single shot at night is a day for night shot, except for when he's in the caves and it's like lit by his flashlight or the fire, or when through the scene where he's actually making the fire. That's all like natural light that they've used. But every other time he's walking around in the dark, it's just got that blue sort of like Blade 2 feel or whatever. It's like everything
Shine on him though.
Yeah.
Like I read that. I was when I was reading about it, and also the commentary. Like you said, so the nighttime shots are basically all done in the day, and so you can be able to see. Like they have to, and then they do the effects.
Yeah, because if they want to light
it
it all, it's gonna look lit. Like
Yeah,
your brain is gonna be like, why are all these where are all these lights coming from?
You can see the light, like the shimmer on them, right? Like that's obviously from like the sun or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Even though
I think they did a good enough job because I've seen really, really bad day for night in so many movies.
yeah, like
and I
old
think
westerns.
like even 28 Weeks Later, I remember seeing that in theaters, and they have this whole sequence where they're all running for their lives in the nighttime, and it's all day for night, and it's just like it's too perfectly lit. You can see like every detail of people's clothes and stuff, and you're like, no, you would never see this at nighttime in a city where the power's off. But yeah, I mean, like again, the movie is so good that I can overlook the early days of green screen and using like figuring these things out in a way that, you know, probably bettered the technology to how we see it today, right? Like they still do day for night, but you never really notice it as harshly as you did in this era when they were really starting to use it all the time. And like, you know, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Robert Zemeckis, they're all buddies, you know, and Scorsese and all them. They're like buddy directors, but they're all like the ones who are pushing forward this technology and being like, here's how we use it. Here's how we like sort of herald it into what we now. Movies are completely different now, and they wouldn't be the way they are without these sort of four figures of evolution. Some maybe would say that not for the better. Yeah, they're pioneering the technology, but like DreamWorks and ILM and all these companies, like they're all owned by these guys, right? Like work together. Anyway, I guess we should maybe sort of start to move into the plot, but this movie doesn't really have a huge amount of it once he's on the island. Like there's a plot there, but it's very simplistic, and
strangely,
you know, we'll probably walk through it quickly, and it's mostly about events rather than it is like what's happening.
Portion was less of the movie than I had remembered because the opening.
It's 90 minutes. It just doesn't feel that long.
Because it's the best. It's obviously the home alone of it all. It's the best part, but like it didn't. It's just that ending, that like 40 minutes of like, so the opening bit is kind of shorter than I remembered. He gets from Russia into that plane crash real quick.
It's 20 minutes. I timed it. I was like, only 20? Like I remember it being like an hour before he gets to the island kind of thing.
Then he's on that island for like a while, but it goes by fast. But then that ending, I don't remember most of it. I don't remember most of it, and that's what was kind of blowing
like now.
my mind.
You don't remember most of it?
No, I do. Obviously, now I remember it, but I mean, But I remember.
But from what you remembered when you first watched it,
yeah, no, me neither. Like I said earlier, I remembered that being like 10 minutes. Like he gets off the island and he meets his I guess ex fiance. And then it ends, but there's like so much more to it than
there's
that.
There's so many deliberate moments too, where like when he goes to like.
Let's start with the beginning.
Okay. In
the beginning, there was knife.
Okay, so one of the first two setup payoffs. So we were at this farm. There's an archway with a logo, and there's two names on the archway.
Well, let's be clear. It's a farm that doesn't really seem to do any farming. It's like more
metal work or something.
She's a sculptor. She's like an artist, basically.
And she likes listening to Elvis.
Yep. This is like the ultimate setup payoff, where at the end of the movie is left up to your interpretation, but you know that he's going back there to be like, I'm the one that left that package on your front.
I interpret it when she goes, there's not a whole lot of anything that way. But Canada, I interpret it as they just drove right past her and went to Canada.
I don't know. He heard her listening to Elvis as she drove away. He saw the wings and then he smiled and he's like, maybe I should go back. And,
I was making a joke about how he wanted to come live with us here in Canada instead of go hang out with some weird.
Hey, we're pretty awesome artist up here. 3 months of the year.
Artists are cool.
6.
Get a solid 3 months, depending on where the country you live.
Actually, I think that Canada reference at the end is actually at the township of Canadian, Texas.
Oh,
what? It's not even Canada?
It's because they're near the Canadian River there.
True.
But anyway, actually, one thing at the one thing at the beginning though of all this is that I was telling a couple of people I'm good. Do another podcast review. I'm very excited. Which one? I'm doing Castaway, and everyone thought Castaway one word, but it's not. It's Castaway, and I think that's a big thing in this whole movie.
Tim,
that it's.
Can I jump in here because I did a lot of.
Let him finish this thought right quick. I got to hear this.
Well, without going too much into because it's the whole movie, but like it's a part of the shell. I think that we're all talking about with the beginning, middle, and end. Of the setup with everything, and with the setup at the it's a very Robert Zemeckis setup too. I was actually getting a lot of Back to the Future flashbacks with the fact that like it's the sign showing two names and the metalwork and the Elvis and all this stuff is going to come back later. As I was watching, I was thinking about the beginning to Back to the Future where they're going through all the clocks in Doc Brown's garage and all the little references that are going to come up later on.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of warm blanket feeling, Steve, that you're mentioning is like right there and then all of a sudden the minutes really start to go by fast and these details of the setup really start to zip past you.
They fade away almost to the point that you can miss them if you're not looking for them at the end kind of thing.
Yeah. And but like when you meet Tom Hanks in Russia, and as they're doing more and more and more setup, but they're making this huge point to talk about how detached he kind of is from his own life. Yeah, and that's where like I think the meaning of the title, and perhaps I'm kind of projecting too much into it.
I think though you can take that same sort of focus and you could place the same focus on Helen Hunt because she's also very career driven. It's one of the main reasons that they haven't decided to get married yet, right? It's not like a movie where it's like you left so I had to move on. It's like no, my whole life stopped. Like I was also doing the same thing you were doing. It's the reason that I was okay. Like there's in that scene where she's like I really wish you would stay for Christmas. Mm-hmm. She like it cuts to them like immediately having like pulling out their planners and like being like, all right, so if you leave for this amount of time, we can do our own Christmas on New Year's Eve and we'll figure it out then, kind of thing.
All these in the car.
we get a couple moments, like you realize that this guy, they make a big to do about him being very punctual. Then as soon as he gets to the island, he starts like, collecting the packages again. And then later in the movie, he says a part of his speech from the beginning about punctuality, which I think is a really good, I think it was a really good, smart way to go. I was confused about the naming of the movie because I had to look this up, and both Castaway 2 words and Castaway 1 word mean the same thing. Interestingly, Castaway 1 word is the only time that it means sending something away, which kind of goes against what we're talking about here, but
I mean, Helen Hunt is sending him away, like in terms of like allowing him to leave, right?
That's why when we the first note that I have is this movie called Castaway or Castaway, right? Where it's weird because like dictionary wise, it's almost swapped from what you would expect.
But it's got to be deliberate, right? Like it's probably meant to facilitate this exact discussion we're having right now.
It's a play on words that has nothing to do with the actual dictionary definition. The fact that they both mean the same thing is almost like when they were titling the movie, they fucked up. You know what I mean? Because to me, the double meaning is that you're cast space away. Because he's casting.
Like it looks better when it's 2 word on the
exactly. But interestingly enough, the research that I did shows that both Castaway 1 word, 2 words are the same, have the same base meaning. Castaway all together. Actually.
Does one of them have another meaning though that the other doesn't?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Castaway 1 word. That's when it means like to throw something away.
Right.
Yeah.
But then like castaway also in like a different vernacular is like it just means that you are literally lost.
Yeah, like
on
literally
an
shipwrecked.
island or something. You know.
Literally
yeah, exactly.
Shipwrecked. Yeah.
Right.
That's what they both mean. Sorry, I don't know if I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, but that's what they both mean.
Oh no. Yeah.
I mean, but the whole opening is beautifully done, right? Like Helen, you already talked about. We see the farm, we see that she's an artist, and then she's sending a package out, and it's unclear what's in the package she sends initially to her husband in a cowboy hat.
Can we ask a question right quick about that?
I assume it's
her husband.
Divorce papers.
I thought it was the divorce papers.
Well, you see like a disillusionment contract later in the movie, right?
But he never opens that.
I actually paused on that part, and that's for someone else, and it's a different name than the one on the farmhouse.
Yeah, for sure. But it's the same sort of shape as the box that he decides not to open, right? We'll never know what was in the box that he decides not to open. That's the point. It's like a Tarantino briefcase.
I think that's
like,
it.
We'll never know.
Because I think you're misremembering that the guy gets his package in Moscow. He gets a package.
I don't think they were divorced.
No, I know. This is just my assumption is that if he's cheating on her in Russia, it's mostly meant to set up that at the end of the movie when Tom Hanks meets that woman, that woman is not going to like meet Tom Hanks and then start cheating on her husband. It's like, oh no, her husband's a piece of shit, so they're probably already divorced over this 4-year period. And she sees a pretty handsome guy on the side of the road looking at a map and decides to stop and be like, "You look like you're lost, partner. What do you need?" Like if he was,
Hanks.
Yeah, exactly. If she was a happily married person, she might not have stopped to help this guy.
Also
at the end of the movie, at the beginning of the movie, I don't think they're rocky roads yet. So I think she was like sending him maybe like a new kind of design thing that she was creating,
like a blueprint for a new art project or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact that he is cheating is like that's all the information you need.
That's a setup that pays off later for sure.
That's movie language for It's on the Rocks. And at the beginning, you see they have 2 different names on the farmhouse, and at the end, one of the names is removed off
okay.
Yeah, which is kind of like the Twin Pines, Lone Pines Mall thing from Back to the Future.
Yeah, it's also the dick that's removed, isn't it?
Yeah. Also a very fun little play.
Which is also just like he's a fucking dick.
Get rid of him.
Get rid of that dick.
Have you guys ever met a Bettina?
No, I don't know if I've ever seen that name before. But
I do love that the look in Tom Hanks' eyes as soon as he realizes that she's single or whatever. Like it's like looks horny. He looks visibly like, "Oh, I got a new girlfriend."
There's that.
Wait, I don't know if he realizes that she's single. He sees the wings on the car and wants to go back and talk to her. Right? Like he's like she literally saved. Like one of the main reasons that he was like, if I can get back, I will deliver this package to this person. I have no idea what's inside of it. And like, you know, he started drawing the wings on the caves, and like his whole symbol for the shield to get through it's also a sail, but like to get through the waves is, you know, they show him painting inside there, but you don't see what it is
until he reveals it when
until
it
flips open, and you're like, whoa, he was painting the wings.
Also,
isn't they literally fly away in the storm? That's
mail,
crazy.
other people's mail.
I think it's that's if it goes to the postal service. I think you'd open up somebody's FedEx and it would be fine. I don't know. I don't know if it adheres to the same rules.
Yeah.
In the open Pacific, it's all fair.
He was on international waters. There's
also
no laws there.
Yeah, there's no laws in international waters. So also he was on the island for 4 years. It was gone.
Yeah, I do want to like kind of go through a couple more of the things in that opening sequence, which I think are pretty great. You know, you see the package travel to Russia. You see that he's in Russia, so you know that, you know, he's an American working as like a systems analyst or some shit. I don't really know what his job is, but he's like, we gotta shave 4 hours off of this clock today.
Just to add on to that, and I think you guys were mentioning something about the camera work earlier. During this first part of the movie, the camera is more active, like movement or whatever. And then when we get to the island, it's more static or whatever. Like it's more
it's
still.
like a lockdown camera where, you know, you're getting some movement, but it's not as energetic, like you're saying. It's not following, or like that whole scene is like a one shot where he's doing this long speech about you know, how time is money, and time, like everything's about time, and if we don't, you know, utilize our time, then the man will come and shut us down or whatever.
But it's representative of like how in his life he's always on the move. He's never in one place. He, like, you know, it's like nailing Jello against the wall. Like he's not going to stay. And then all of a sudden he's stuck on this island, and like, you know, and his. I kind of took the movie as one big metaphor, really, because like when he gets to the island, it's as if all of his indecision and all of his commitment challenges in life have finally caught up to him. And now he's stuck, and the camera is now stuck with him, kind of thing. Was my personal interpretation of it. Was everything was very dynamic and moving. The camera view was on the box, and you know, and you can see the Russian FedEx guy pick up the box, and you're being carried
away. Package cam or whatever.
I loved package cam.
Yeah, that package is like, you know, kind of like him. You know, it's on the move constantly, and. We also get, you know, these little tiny mundane moments of just like him, you know, he could have just tore that package open, but they deliberately make him pull out his little pocket knife on his keys to like open up that big tube, and he pulls it out, and you're like, oh, that's him, you know, utilizing something that like everybody has a Swiss Army knife in their house somewhere, I think. Like,
is there a reason why he used an inappropriately sized box for that little timer clock?
Well, I think because he wanted to, like, he was doing it as a point, right? Like he wanted to be like, what is it? Is it blueprints? Is it a poster of a naked lady? Oh no, it's an egg timer that I started 87 hours ago.
You're hoping it was a naked lady.
Also, as a small aside, because we're here, do you guys remember when this movie came out, it being people having a real problem with the amount of product placement from FedEx, and then the shots in here where they show like Panasonic, they show like Snickers, I don't remember
anybody having a problem with it, because I think people who have a problem with product placement, it's like, you live in the real world, right?
No,
like, what is he going to have, a made-up chocolate bar in his backpack?
So back in 2000, product placement did exist in movies, but not on this level at that time. They didn't have like it being a FedEx movie.
What about Wayne's World?
Okay, but
so
that's
actually.
So what I'm saying is nowadays you get these kinds of product placements like all through a movie, like especially like Netflix movies, where it's just like every couple of scenes you get something in the background. I just remember when this movie came out, early internet, you know, people would talk about it, and people being like, I can't believe there's so much product placement in the movies these days.
I think that's a dead argument, and it always was a silly argument, because it's like, first of all, those products are paying for the movie to be made. Second of all, those products exist. I know, but let me finish. Those products exist in everyday life, and it adds an authenticity to it.
Authenticity,
If Snickers appeared 15 times in the movie, then that's when you start to be like, oh my god.
Well, I think it was the FedEx part of it was the.
Well, no, they went to FedEx because they wanted to have a level of authenticity in the movie that wouldn't exist otherwise if you made up like FPS or whatever, like some random made up plane.
To my understanding, like Tom Hanks was actually in his spare time in between whatever movie, was reading about how FedEx has all sorts of planes going over the Atlantic and the Pacific so very often, and he contemplated what happens if they're caught in a storm and the plane goes down. Yeah. And that's literally how it started. And it wasn't until Robert Zemeckis was on board and Tom Hanks was on board, it wasn't until they got that screenwriter, I forget his name, Bill something, to get on board with it. And then they approached FedEx, and FedEx was actually apprehensive because they didn't want to make a movie about them losing a plane.
Yeah, I remember hearing that part too.
So they said, but no, like, there'll be plot points where you're explained that you're making efforts to try to find us and and there'll be an ending where it'll be appropriate where Tom Hanks is being brought back home and brought back, well, not Tom Hanks, but being brought home, brought back to real life. Yeah, Chuck, thank you. And so it was like most certainly, yes, in the end it's product placement, but it's not as cold as a lot of other product placement is.
I mean, like there's movies
in like a Transformers movie where like, I'm going to listen to my Beats by Dre or whatever.
Yeah, or like
this robot.
Every time someone's thirsty, they're drinking Mountain Dew, and you're like, I don't know if this businessman would be drinking Mountain Dew. But like it's in there.
this washer fluid,
yeah, that Mountain Dew with like the Mountain Dew Morning or whatever it's called with the fucking taurine in it as well.
But I do remember there was a slew of people in the 90s and in the early 2000s who had this like big war against product placement in movies. Like they were making a difference, like they were saving the whales by being like, Pepsi shouldn't be allowed to be in movies. And it's like, why do you care that fucking much? And I think in a movie like this in particular, it does add a level of authenticity to the movie that makes the movie better. If it was
it's supposed to exist in the real world, kind of thing.
Yeah. Whereas, you can think of like the Wayne's World bit where they're just like going out of their way to be like, ugh. And I think that's kind of where it started, where when movies started pointing out product placement to be like ridiculous and it's meant to like poison your brain or whatever. That's when people started to be like, ugh, I can't believe how many people were wearing Nikes in this movie.
Well, it's like what I say about fire. Fire can be good, it can be bad. It can heat your home, it can burn down your home. It's how you use it, right?
Yeah.
So proper product placement to elevate the story, good. Product placement just to make money, bad.
Yeah, I think like like the Panasonic CD player, Jason, that you mentioned. If Tom Hanks would be like a Snickers bar and a Panasonic CD player,
so
that has an 8-hour battery life and goes great with this Elvis CD produced by.
I have to ask you, Steve, where does the line between Jimmy Stewart and Tom Hanks?
There is no line except for me and my wife Rita. She said that
he mentions Rita, and then we know who he's talking about.
See that there, FedEx? I'll pull it down FedEx there for you, Rita. But anyway, the one thing I did take from that little knapsack full of Snickers and Panasonic was that it was also, here he is, he's also giving away like all this free stuff that he would also be able to use on the island later. That like he is living like a very abundant lifestyle. And he's going to come to appreciate this kind of stuff later.
He's also in Russia, which that Russia can't get certain American-made products, so he has a backpack full of these American-made products that he can toss out like prizes to people who are like, they've never had Snickers bar before.
We have snorkers, and it's made of bark.
Yes.
Also, I don't think you can literally give people money. Like at this time, I don't know if were they still communist in 2000?
No. That was after the fall of the wall.
Because I watched that still, like, Tetris movie, and they were still like you couldn't literally get paid for anything. It was all very locked down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this very much seemed like this was like one of the first sort of like established FedEx like buildings in Russia, because like when they're loading that truck, it's like this is the most important truck. It's going to the Kremlin. Or it's like if there was a better FedEx building in Russia, they probably would have had it attached to the Kremlin or something, right? It would just go directly there and not stop at like a sorting facility. So it seems like he was there specifically to be like, I got to work out all the bugs here in non-Soviet Russia.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and then I mentioned already, we get the first show of the knife where, you know, he could have ripped the package open, but he cuts it open. And then you see that knife a couple more times and it's on his car keys, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. He uses it to cut open the gift. He's like struggling to get the ribbon off his gift that Helen Hunt gives him with the pocket watch inside it. And she's like, here, just use this. Yeah. And he sets it to Memphis time. But there's also like that kind of nice scene.
Kelly time.
Like, it's this like huge sort of like Irish style Xmas gathering, you know, like where there's like way too many family members there that they're like, we had to shove 8 tables together and we put a giant tablecloth over it so you can't tell. And like people are like shoulder to shoulder.
You don't have family dinners like that?
I don't have that many people in my family. I thought this scene was great because I immediately I wrote down, it's a Christmas movie. So Castaway, Christmas movie.
Nice.
We should have done that during Subversion of Christmas month.
Exactly.
Which I feel represents.
But you could tell that it was
family.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just saying it was a very energetic scene, which I feel represented like a family gathering like that. Really.
It's also a very sort of
Home Alone.
Right, yeah. It's a very Spielberg scene where it's like everybody's talking at the same time, and you
which is
really
realistic.
Focus. It is realistic, and you're like trying to focus. You know that like scene in Close Encounters from the Third Kind where like Richard Dreyfuss is on the phone and like his kid is in the background like smacking a doll on the side of like a crib that he's way too big to be inside of, and his mom is like picking up another kid. It had the energy of that.
Yeah.
And then they pass like this like disgusting candied yam dish where I'm like, oh god.
Never had
Americans.
What is it, sweet potatoes and marshmallows, right?
Yeah, it's good.
I've never been. Is it good?
It's good.
Is it?
It's very good. I love that shit. My grandmother used to make that kind of stuff. They're Southern Ontario, sort of close to the border, like here basically, but more south. There's a thing called watercress or Watergate or something, and it's literally just a salad that's made from marshmallows and Cool Whip and like nuts, and it's so fucking weird. But when I was a kid, I loved that shit because it's like,
why would you call it a salad though? At that point, it's a dessert. You don't put that on your plate next to your turkey.
It's watercress salad, and you do. Maybe it's the same idea as like a applesauce with your pork chop. You dip your turkey in your watercress. I don't know. I would just like sit at the bowl and fucking go nuts on marshmallows. But you put it with your Christmas dinner.
The little marshmallows.
The little marshmallows, yeah. The multicolored marshmallows.
Like the wacky aunt makes that, and the one who like tries to cut your bangs for you or whatever. I can cut your bangs.
Why do you keep offering to cut my bangs?
Yeah, I'm good at it. And she has like all fucked up bangs.
I'll just swoop it over.
I don't know if you are. But it's also, it establishes that he has something wrong with one of his teeth, which is good. And that's really all you need when you know that he's going to land on a desert island and you see that he's got a problem with your tooth. You're like, oh fuck, this guy.
And his toothache hits him just as he's getting the beeper, knowing that his schedule is going to change. And also at the same time, the family is poking and prodding him and Helen Hunt to ask, like, when are you guys going to finally get married? And they make and they make a joke out of it and try to make light of it. But you also, it informs the audience, okay, this is the stage that their relationship is in.
Yeah.
But it also
expects them to get married because I'm not even sure which. I assume they're at Helen Hunt's family, right? Gathering and not his.
It's a
little bit unclear, but I think it's her family and not his. Because there's one.
Yeah, because they're talking about her ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, and there's like a teenager who's like, "Wait, Aunt Helen was married already?" And everyone's like, "Shut up."
The kid fucked up and just called her Helen.
Yeah, Aunt Helen Hunt.
Aunt Helen Hunt got married? To who? Is that
Paul
what George Clooney's always calling her on her cell phone?
To your point there, though, I think that's what this movie does really well is like show don't like. I mean, obviously they're verbally saying it, but it's not like outright saying it. It's like an indirect kind of way, like show don't tell kind of thing, right?
Yeah, we're getting a slice of the atmosphere, and that's informing us of what's going on without directly saying. One thing, though, just before the Christmas dinner scene, as they're leaving Russia, he and his friend, and I forget the character's name, but they're on the plane ride. Yeah, and the flight attendant comes up to him in the middle of their conversation to ask about how his wife's doing because she's dealing with a very serious case of cancer. Yeah. And then you see at the terminal after they land, Tom Hanks making this very inept attempt at like trying to be sympathetic, but it's comes off as like this is how out of it he is from his friends and family, that his closest friend, his wife is going through a very serious bout of cancer, and he's so out of touch that he's saying like, "Oh, I know a guy," and like I'm sure this guy also knows guys too. Like
that's the vibe I got.
So also like like he didn't ask, right? The flight attendant asked, or no, that was also I think he was also a captain of a plane as well.
Yeah.
Because she asked, they were drinking the wine, and then they offered her some, and she's like, "I have to like fly the plane or whatever." But that's Pilot Gwen or whatever. But she asks, and she's a fucking pilot who just pilots these guys around. It's not like they're best friends, right? Like whereas these two,
they're not cubicle buddies. Yeah, So that she's doing a better job than his best friend in asking how he's doing.
Yeah,
and.
No, yeah, and you're right. That whole thing is very clinical and awkward, right? Where it's like, I'm going to try and show that I do care by listing a bunch of cold facts and being like, yeah, I know a guy whose wife was also sick, and then a doctor helped her, so maybe you can get the doctor to help you that helped her.
Yeah,
he played that like not really being in touch with the moment really well. I thought in that moment.
I also think
maybe
that he
did
a
on
good
the
job
spectrum.
Well, maybe, but that's not really something they played into in the year 2000. In the year 2000, Tom Hanks was autistic and went to an island.
He broke Tim.
Sorry. Anyway, go on.
But I think he also played like he probably just doesn't know how to have those conversations, because this whole beginning chunk of the movie is showing that he's like a problem solver, right? So like even in that moment, he's like trying to find a way to solve the problem of the awkwardness between his wife dying and all that kind of stuff. And it's also very important for his time on the island that he's a problem solver, so he's going to figure things out.
Yeah, there was
Same
another
thing with the bike thing.
There was another thing too where they show his certificate of being of like going through sailor school or whatever. So it's not too weird that he knew how to like put together a boat, and then he knew that he needed to sail, and then
I feel like I want to get into it once we get to the island, but like I feel like I would do pretty well on the island, but I would absolutely never escape the island. I would be there until I died. Like I would die.
I want to talk about that more when we get to that part too.
So I also did want to mention that giant ass meal, he is just shoveling it down, and I'm like, good last meal before you get like, cast away. He could have just grabbed some Wendy's on the way to the airport, and it would have sucked.
Hi, Madison.
She can't hear you.
Yeah, you always do it, and she never can hear you.
But the effort was there.
Hi, gentlemen.
Oh, hello. I do think it's also important that I think he specifically takes the keys with him because she gives it to him to cut the present open, and he uses that as an opportunity to like have to go back to give her the other box, which
the real present
is like, you don't really know, but we all assume it's a ring, right?
Yeah.
That also lends into his issues with commitment. That here's another thing that like really like they all know what it is, and they're not going to say it. They're going to wait until after all this to do it. Yeah. And it's like, like I get it, like it's a time and place thing, but that's kind of the point too, is that he keeps undermining the time and place for it all, and that he is a problem solver, but he's like a people pleaser. He's doing enough to keep people happy, but he's not resolving his own problems.
Yeah, he can solve. Yeah, he can solve the problems of everything that's happening around him, but anything that has to do with him personally, it's extremely difficult. And I understand that.
Yeah.
If I gotta borrow a kid's bike to deliver some mail, I gotta borrow a kid's bike.
I'm just telling them that you stole a bike.
Oh, it's a crippled kid now, is it?
So now he's crippled.
Yeah. He's on fire.
I got the bike back to him, and
nevermore.
Anyway, so
she's gonna
if she had let him take the keys,
she sent me a message the other day.
I know they were the car keys, so it wouldn't have made any sense because she wouldn't have been able to drive away. But
but it made a point about the knife. There's a reason why he doesn't have a knife and all this stuff. Yeah.
But it's like such subtle things where you're just like, okay, well, he would have had a knife, which would have made everything a billion times easier, even though it's like a nail file size knife. He could have used it to open the coconuts faster. He could have done a ton of stuff.
He does get some pretty crazy boosts to his tool making ability.
It's like a video game where he's like, I gotta collect all these packages because I gotta get them back to the customers, and then he's like, maybe I'll open them.
I feel like the survival game, people went and looked at this movie at how you like evolve your.
It's actually true. It's actually
how
true.
you
I was
evolve.
watching
You see him learning in real time once he gets to the island. He
any
he
game
fucks something
or
up,
other
and then he's
thing...
like, "Oh yeah, if I just use the ability that I have previously and connect it to my new ability, boom." And then we see him later, like it's 4 years later when we see it, but he has the skate tied to.
Well, you can see him gaining XP.
Yeah,
you see him gaining XP, and then they're like, all right, you've seen him gain this much XP in this amount of time, and then he knocks his own fucking tooth out, and then it goes to 4 years later, and you're like, imagine how much more XP he gained in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
As soon as the spirit goes through the fish, you hear the winning chime from Final Fantasy.
He's got that hero pose.
Hey, he mentioned Final Fantasy, not me. Okay.
Yeah, that's on me.
Well, he also loves it, so it's
yes.
Connect things to other things he loves.
June 22nd.
But like, this movie is like, there's a great story. I don't want to get too far into it because I could go talk about it forever. But the guy who produced a lot of television for NBC had gone and watched Castaway, and then over the weekend stewed on it, and he went to like a pitch meeting with all these writers, including Damon Lindelof and J.J. Abrams on Monday, and was like, so I saw this movie over the weekend, and it's about a guy who gets cast away, and I'm like, why don't we just make a movie about that?
And they're like, do you think you're the only person that's seen one of the best movies ever made?
There's an interview with J.J. Abrams who's like, and I was like, there's no fucking way we can make a Castaway show. Like, the reason that movie is so interesting is because the pacing is perfect, and it's like contained so perfectly within the amount of time that it takes to tell you the story.
Do they find others? That's what Castaway never
No, that's what J.J. Abrams was like, okay, yeah, whatever you say. And then he went home and he's like, do.
Yeah.
Like, what about a hatch?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, whoa, a hatch. What could be in the hatch?
I was thoroughly disappointed to learn that Castaway helped to create the show Lost. I was very disappointed to hear that.
Anything where anybody is trapped on an island in terms of video games, movies, or television after this movie is 100% inspired by, and they obviously all the writers would go and be like, we got to watch Castaway and figure out what we could do better. It's like, why don't we add polar bears to the island?
That one island in Just Cause 2 that if you fly over, you crash,
Mhm.
and then there's a smoke monster coming after you, and then there's
You have to end every episode with a cliffhanger.
This is what brings me to my first question that I wanted to present to all of you guys. I think that this is probably one of the best plane crashes I've ever seen in any movie or television show or even video game or anything. Like, I think it's so well done. The tension is ramped so perfectly. You're like, I didn't realize when I saw the trailer for Castaway that everybody, because there's a lot of people on that plane. It's not just him and like two pilots. It's like him and
5 altogether.
4 other people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that scene where he's taking the bandage off, and I don't. Did he cut himself at some point earlier that I don't
think they should. I asked myself that, like, where did that?
I think that was meant to, because I couldn't remember either, but I think that him peeling that bandage off is meant to like give us a moment that everybody on planet Earth has done at some point, like pulled off a bandage and been like, this fucking hurts.
What a sucky baby.
But then right after that, like the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to you happens.
Horrible things happen to him in that plane crash.
Yeah.
So I was a little confused. It was like when on my first watch, like how is he getting sucked out of the plane? Like I don't think there's a hole in the plane yet, but the air pressure, I guess, is what was fucking shit up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's also, you know, like that's not necessarily how it would happen. It's just like cinematic stuff needs to be exciting, and if it was just like him being like, "Whoa!"
They never really explain what happens either. Like it's the storm, but the plane like gets broken in half or something.
It gets broken in half when it's already in the water.
Yeah.
After in the water, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, that whole scene is them being like, "There's a storm ahead. We need to move around." And then they lose radio contact. And all this like information is given to you, and it happens pretty quickly. But they basically travel way outside of their path, which is like that's meant to give you the information that it's like if anybody comes looking for them, they're not going to be looking in the right spot. They're going to be looking in like a 1 billion mile radius,
500,000 kilometer square meter radius or whatever.
Another fun little setup payoff, which I think a lot of people do when they travel by plane, is he takes his shoes off to let his feet kind of, you know, relax or whatever. Yeah. But then he doesn't have shoes later.
Yeah. You never asked the question, Steve.
Yeah. I was gonna ask the question. Do you guys, in your vast knowledge of television, movies, and video games, have a favorite plane crash that trumps this one? Or if this is your favorite one that comes in a close second? And I guess why?
Who do you want to go first?
Well, I didn't place this question to Tim, but I did place it to you guys earlier. I forgot to ask you, Tim, earlier, so I know you haven't had time to prepare. So I'll go with Kalen first.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say that I think this is one of the best shot plane crash scenes. You mentioned about the tension and everything, and we're with Chuck. We're with Tom Hanks' character Chuck the whole time, as opposed to going with all the other characters in the plane. We're with him the whole time. We're feeling what he's feeling. And I think that this scene is probably one of the best executed plane crash scenes. But when you asked the question, I had to think about it a little bit, and I couldn't think of there wasn't anything that quickly came to my mind, but one plane crash scene event that I think rivals it, or, you know, kind of, you know, a little bit, is Flight, which also is Zemeckis.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the Denzel movie?
Yeah, Denzel Washington.
So he has to land the plane all drunk.
He flips it upside down.
He's also on like every drug known to mankind.
There's that scene at the beginning of the movie where he's like, "Hello, everyone, and welcome to the flight," and he says the name of the movie.
Welcome to the movie Flight. But
his hand is
Flight.
His hand is just off to the side, and we see it. And he's pouring a double. He's pouring like two of those things.
Yeah, he's making a screwdriver, vodka orange,
which is like surprisingly a way more common thing that isn't talked about a lot, but like. There's so many automated devices in planes now that you really don't need to fly it. But in the case of an emergency, that's why there are two human beings that are flying it. But you could have completely automated planes, but because they know that like a computer cannot think creatively in a time of crisis, like a computer would never think like, all right, I've got to fly the plane upside down for a bit and then flip it back upright,
or like,
and then land it in a cornfield. The plane would be like, "How do I crash?" Or the computer would be like, "How do I crash this without killing everybody on board?"
In Sully, they land in the Hudson River, right? Like that's another movie where they.
That's Sully, the real life movie that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Also starring Tom Hanks as Sully Sullenberger.
Also, he's
directed by Clint Eastwood. Yeah,
that's my pick though.
Here's his Flight. It's a good one. Yeah, it's a good one. I wouldn't even. I don't know if I would consider that a plane crash though, because he lands it almost successfully. I mean, he lands it pretty well.
Okay, that's fair.
It's an emergency landing in the Hudson, I guess, is very technically defined as.
Well, is that from Spider-Man?
That's Sully.
Sully. It happened in real life, Kalen. You don't remember when Sully Sullenberger
Am I next?
did that?
Am I next?
He was a hero. He was on every late night talk show show for like years.
Talk show ho?
Ho! I was gonna say host, and then I was like, ho show. Show.
There was that episode of Spider-Man with the symbiote when the spaceship is coming back to Earth, and they I think they crashed in the Hudson.
Yeah, and that's what the real life event was
Oh,
based
that's
on.
where they got that from? Oh,
Yeah.
shit.
That's why Sully Sullenberger did it. He was like, I saw this episode of the
Saw it, Spider-Man.
90s Spider-Man cartoon show.
Yeah,
There's a symbiote on board. I know it.
I know it.
He didn't even hit birds. He just like was like, we gotta land this thing immediately.
I'm sick of being in the air. So mine is Lost, but there's a kind of a caveat to it. I really enjoy, if you take all of the reason why I chose Lost was it's like newer. It's a few years later. They ramped up.
Not even that much new compared to
that's
this show.
actually, as soon as I said it, it's only about 4 years later.
Yeah.
But for television, it was crazy.
I mean, I gave you that anecdote where the guy who made Lost watched Castaway and was like, we got to make this into a show, but spooky and weird.
Lost is one of my favorite shows. But the reason I also choose Lost is because you see the plane crash from like everybody who was on the plane's point of view. So you actually get like a whole bunch of different...
and throughout like all
you even
seasons,
get
like sometimes you'll see it like later in
spoilers,
different seasons and stuff. Yeah.
It's revealed that they see the plane crashing from the others like little compound as well.
Yeah, right?
Right?
And the plane cracks in half, which is very cool. A very cool moment.
But
For
I
a
will
TV
say-
show, I was like, holy shit, that's sick.
On a couple of honorable mentions, Breaking Bad had a pretty good plane crash thing in it.
Oh yes,
where
yes.
And then the storyline behind the plane crash, it influences so many things that happen in that season. And then the last thing I want to bring up is the original Forest game. When that game came out, that sequence, the plane crash sequence in that had never really been done before. You're in like first person for it, and it had never, there aren't like a lot of games that ever did that, and I believe you can also experience that moment in VR. So those are sort of mine. Sorry if
you just made me think of another one when you said game.
Jason, I said one and you named like 10, so now you really limited the list for everybody else.
Sorry.
Tim, do you have one or?
Well, because I'm rolling in my head because the plane crash in Castaway is so very specific and functional to it, and so the one thing about the plane crash in Castaway for me is that it actually does play off one of my own personal fears, and that's of heights and depths, and especially the part when he's floating up and he's looking down, seeing the plane remnants sink into the dark ocean beneath him. That actually does give me like a little bit of butterflies, a little bit of scare. So I was thinking there's all sorts of, I was thinking like how many movies would have plane crashes in them, and it turns out tons and tons and tons.
All of them. Every single one has one. You just don't know what's happening somewhere in the world.
The Great Muppet Caper, all of them. Follow that bird. But one that I think might be comparable, I'd have to rewatch it though, but I remember it being like effective on me as far as
Jurassic Park 3.
No, possibly.
It was pretty good.
It was pretty good. But that sense of powerlessness as it's happening would be, and to give it kind of a weird comparison, would be the movie Alive about the the soccer team that crashes in the Andes, I think.
It's the original they crash and they have to eat each other movie from the 92.
But the lead up to that, where they're watching like their teammates get like sucked out of the back of the plane and such as it's crashing, like that kind of that stands out in my memory. But I'd have to watch it again to pay attention to how technically it's achieved, because the plane crash in Castaway, it's the one thing about it, and once again, it makes me appreciate that this is a movie I can watch. Everything that happens in the plane crash is actually observable in spite of how dynamic it is. Mm-hmm. That you're able to really pay attention to a lot of details. They're very absorbable. And, him opting to take the watch from Kelly and he's not wearing his shoes, and the details on the map and all that's going on, it's still relevant, and you're still absorbing that information in spite of how hectic and noisy this is. Yeah. And it's like this big noise, and the movie's going to be super quiet for a long time after this. Yeah. So it's hard to compare these things, because I would say, in the sense that if it's to affect to what the movie's trying to do, Because like the only other thing that comes to mind would be that, I forget the name of it. It's that Liam Neeson fighting wolves movie.
Oh yeah.
Gray or something?
The gray. Yeah.
The gray. Thank you. Where that I would, and that's another one I would have to rewatch again in order to examine it. But that would be comparable in the sense of like how is this relevant to what's going on for the rest of the movie, or what the rest of the movie is about.
Right.
So that's one thing that's tough. But like all the movies that everyone's mentioned so far, as far as plane crashes go, they're all great. So it's an interesting comparison to make. So yeah, I would put it under the basis of that, of like how what does this have to do with the rest of the movie, to qualify it, and that's the one that most comes to my mind is Alive.
I got 2 more honorable mentions.
I haven't done mine yet, you dickhead.
1 second. Edge of Tomorrow and Fight Club.
Oh my god!
What if those were Steve's?
Yeah, now I have none left. You guys mentioned them all.
You can
Except
talk
for Final Destination 1. Yeah, I wasn't gonna say Final Destination, but it did pop into my head as you were talking about the importance of like the plane crash and like everything that's happening to the movie.
Yeah.
But there are like I did jokingly say Jurassic Park 3, which it actually does have a pretty dope plane crash.
It's one of the best parts of the movie, honestly.
There's not a lot of great parts though, so it's not saying a lot.
It's the most tense part.
Like
it's dumb, but it's
one of the
most
only like, because like, you know, say what you will about The Lost World, it has a lot of really great effects going on in it, and then Jurassic World and the ones that proceed after it, they do have this sort of like ability to film things and have you still believe what's going on is happening. But there are moments in that plane crash in Jurassic Park 3 where it looks like they just filmed a Jurassic Park 3 the ride, where the like thing is like like coming at the camera, and it's like clearly a rubber monster, and you're like, oh my god, the Spinosaurus looks like shit. But
you have to borrow the Jaws robot.
Yeah, and Jason, you're right. I did think about the Lost crash because, you know, you see it from a million different angles, and even like seasons later, you'll see like, oh, remember Bernard and Rose? Let's see their perspective of the and it's like you see them having their own, and it's like seasons and seasons later, they're still flashing back to this plane crash, and they film new stuff from different angles, and it's pretty interesting. But one that you guys didn't mention, I guess, is Sully Sullenberger's landing in the movie Sully. It's great, but that's not my answer. BioShock, the first BioShock game, has a really good plane crash, and it's the closest to when he's having to swim, when he uses the raft to get to the top, all that stuff. You're seeing the pieces sink around you. There's fire. It's the middle of the night. The only difference is that there's a weird, creepy lighthouse in the middle of the ocean that you're like, why is this here? But
Good question.
It was pretty good.
Was the red attachment paddles or whatever? Oars?
The thing that traps him for a second. I wasn't sure because it sinks pretty heavily, and I'm like, what is that made of that it sinks? Yeah. So
I was wondering if that was like a transponder to locate him or something.
Ooh.
Okay.
Like
maybe. The black box or something.
Yeah.
Because when it falls out, it sinks like right away, and then when he opens the raft and he starts to fly up, it gets hooked. And all I could think was like, what a poorly designed thing that's, you know, like it can get hooked on something so easily. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But I guess they expect. But I also did want to mention that like the thing that makes this so great, other than what Tim said, where it's also like setting up all these sort of small bits that come into the movie later, is that shot where he's like looking terrified and he's looking out the window, and then you're seeing the clouds, and then you all of a sudden just see the water rushing at the window, and it's like probably one of the most horrifying things that I can imagine happening to anybody.
Do you think this is like in Sphere, where Dustin Hoffman was clearly doing his own stunt? Do you think that was Tom? That was old Tommy boy down there doing swimming?
I don't know. He did look like he was doing a lot of his own swimming stunts in this movie, but there are a few ones that I'm like, I need to.
They were doing a lot of that. The shots from that scene were in like a little kind of controlled pool thing or whatever. I was watching I have the DVD, which is again weird that I have not watched this movie more than I have. But yes, he was doing a majority of that. Also, quick little nitpick: wouldn't he fly forward when they hit the water because like it stops them and his momentum?
Well, he's like holding on. He's got himself like webbed.
Yeah, he's like webbed into that.
Right,
cargo
into netting
net
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like he's already going to get hurt like 10 more times in the movie, so they're like, maybe let's not dislocate both his shoulders
which
immediately.
is what I did have that moment where I was like, the way that he's wrapped up in that cargo net, he would have dislocated both of his shoulders.
Yeah,
I thought that
But
exactly.
you know, like I there, like the CGI that happens later, I'm kind of like, you know, I'm forgiving enough when there's a man like bleeding to death, being like, oh, why aren't you wearing your life jacket, Tom?
That was awesome.
He's like, my name's Chuck.
That was awesome, though. We also get that thing, like, right when he gets on the island, he learns that he's been calling the guy the wrong name the whole time, which I thought was funny.
Albert.
Yeah. Albert,
Calling
not
him Alan.
Alan. Albert.
What a dick.
Well, I think it's because, like, everybody probably called him Al, so he probably assumed his name was Alan instead of Albert and never actually asked him, like, what's your actual name? So he's just calling him Alan all the time.
That kind of attests to what you were saying, Tim, about how he's kind of, like, socially inept or whatever, sort of.
Yeah, he's very detached from everything.
Yeah, I had a friend named Ben for like almost 2 years, and sometimes I would just call him Ben all the time, but every once in a while I'd be like, Benjamin, how are you? And then I'd walk by him, and then one day he was like, dude, my name's not Benjamin, and I was like, what? What's your name? And he's like, Bennett, and I was like, what? The fuck? I've been calling you Benjamin this whole time. Why didn't you tell me earlier?
He's the villain from Grando.
When you guys were young and you call your friends and then their parent answers, do you say their name in full? Like, you know, do the whole kind of like proper, nice kind of thing or whatever?
I don't remember. You know,
I don't even know what you meant by that question.
Depends.
Sorry.
Well, okay, so I'll elaborate. What you
can I
just mentioned,
talk to
Steven,
Christopher, please?
Oh, like, can I talk to Jonathan instead of John?
Well,
John
that's
there?
exactly it. So
It's
in
weirdly
school,
possible.
The guy I knew named John, I called him up. I think his mom answered or something, and I was trying to be nice or whatever. I was like, yes, hello, is Jonathan available? And they're like, there's no Jonathan here. And I'm like, you know, John, his last name? Is like, yeah, John's here. I'm like, okay.
Well, I had a friend named John, and his name was not Jonathan.
Jon or whatever, right?
No, his name was João because he was Portuguese, and like it was like Jaun was his actual name, but I never knew that because no one ever told me. So I was like, John. I said, is Jonathan there? And they were like, there's no Jonathan here. And I was like, what the fuck? And they're like, his name's João. I was like, João? You guys French or something?
I had a friend named Jay whose name was just a letter J, and I don't want to say much more about it, but I would just always be like, what's your fucking name?
The mafia is going to come after
him. What's your fucking name?
Okay, so we get a very terrifying shot of Tom Hanks getting blown up by the engine as it blows up. Everything's sinking.
If it wasn't terrifying, it would probably be pretty fun being all like thrown around in the middle of the ocean.
Okay.
No.
Whatever you say,
This
Kaylin.
movie encapsulates like 6 of my fears in like a 5-minute span.
I
Probably because I watched
ocean.
this movie when I was like 15 or 14 or whatever.
This is one of those moments where I'm like, I would probably do all right because I hate being underwater. I was terrified of swimming when I was a kid, and I eventually didn't get over the fear, but I was like, all right, the one thing that will make me feel better about how terrified I am of being underwater and drowning and being bad at swimming is becoming amazing at swimming. So I took swimming lessons to the point that I was a certified lifeguard. And then I was like, I'm done now. I know how to swim so well that I can save other people if they're dying while they try to swim. And that's all I needed. So I would probably do okay in the getting on the raft part, at least. But this is when we get to the part of the movie where we start to realize that, oh yeah, Tom Hanks is one of the best actors who ever lived in all of human existence. Because he's been sort of a dick the whole movie, and then now this guy is trapped on an island and we have to see him struggle for a long time. We have a pretty extensive sequence of him, being unconscious, realizing that he's near the an island, where we get this kind of nice shot of the storm lighting up the island and him seeing it in the darkness, and then he goes unconscious, I guess, again, and he wakes up in the morning on the shore, and he immediately begins to start picking up the FedEx packages. And like in my head, I'm like, is this like shock where he's just like, I gotta get these packages, or is he like thinking
he's devoted?
There might be things. It's a sense of devotion, but like that would not be your first thought.
He assumes he's gonna get rescued in a few minutes.
That was the other. These are the options, right? It's like, do you think he's picking these up because he thinks he can get them to the people that need them? Is that a subsect of him being in shock? Because that should not be your first thought. Is like, I gotta get these packages to the people who paid money to have them delivered.
You want to try and keep life as normal. You want to try and keep that normality. I think is kind of
also like what happens when you go into shock. Is like you're like go into the routine.
Yeah. Well, I actually to kind of speak back to what you're saying about your swimming lessons. I think that's a lot about not just him picking up the packages, but a lot of things that happen on the island. A lot of it is about control when it comes to fear. That a lot of what factors into fear in reality is things that we can't control. And so he's in a state of shock, and it's this one thing that he does recognize. It's the one thing familiar, and kind of autopilot, not to make too much of a pun, but autopilots his way around the island to pick up these familiar things, and it's something to do while his mind is catching up to himself. That's at least how I interpret it, and it was just like, this is something I have control over right now.
Yeah. Which
everything else
is
on the shitter.
Huge theme that comes into the movie later on as well, right? Where he literally says that to like his buddy later on.
Yeah,
not about picking up packages, but about something much more real and heavy.
You'd be happy. I got all the packages for you. Yeah. But yeah, I that's how I kind of looked at that part. Was just like. Once again, it's still his old life, his feeble attempt at trying to control the situation. And what's the one thing that he can do for himself right now? I'll go get the packages, I guess.
Because he just gave me a thought.
No information given to him.
He leaves a message for the Cool Wings logo lady that her package saved his life. But what about the person with the Wilson volleyball package that saved his life? What about the skates package that saved his life? Well, what about the videotapes?
Okay, well, because he does have all those things in the car at the end. You just don't see him deliver those things.
Yeah.
No, I'm not even joking, Kalen. Like he has those things that
There's no way he has the tape or Wilson. Wilson's gone.
No, he has a Wilson volleyball in the car at the end. It's sitting in the seat. He's going to deliver it.
Yes, you're right. A new one. He has a fresh one.
And he has the skates and everything.
Yes,
like he's bringing those to the people that he like memorized the addresses and everything.
Nice.
Yeah. He's delivering all those things, and he probably left the same message to all of those people. Like this volleyball saved my life. These figure skating skates saved my life. Like he probably he's going to leave the same messages for all those people.
Nice, good eye.
And actually, from those packages, there's one part, and perhaps this is also me kind of projecting onto the movie again, but he opens up the gift from the grandpa to the grandson, and like in the card, it said, the most beautiful thing in the world is, of course, the world itself. And he reads it with such emptiness and emotional distance that like he really doesn't believe this right now.
Yeah.
But it ends up kind of being a truth that like
sarcasm.
Right. The world's so awesome. Look where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
But really, like him coming to terms with the world around him and accepting the levels of control that he has ends up being what turns it around and develops a different appreciation for the world around him. So it's for me also kind of like a big turning point in that movie where it's like it's really illustrating the broken pieces in him, and that like him being on this island is a giant metaphor for his life.
I like it. And I think that he finds the flashlight on the corpse of one of the pilots, and there's a nice scene in between this and what the point is. I think is that like he's using the flashlight to like constantly look at his lost love, but then he falls asleep with it in the cave next to him. And I think that it fading out it's pretty potent as well, right? Where it's like, is that sort of the spotlight of the rest of the world not able to find him? Is that like his dwindling hope? Is that, the rest of the world's hope dwindling?
Good metaphor, or like visual metaphor.
But it also is like a metaphor for don't be stupid, idiot. Fucking turn your flashlight off.
He's really not considering the life he's living at the moment. He's just burning it all away.
It's also his last sort of like the last piece of modern technology that he will be able to utilize in a conventional way, where he's like, I'm using this for light. The light is gone. I've got a skate. What do I use that for? It's an axe now. Like, he has to be innovative with the other things that he has, right? We get that I think that the most interesting part of the movie is this whole chunk where he's just figuring out how to do stuff. I'm sure we all have
learning.
And I'm sure we all probably have a different favorite part of that whole sequence, but it's just little moments. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where Robert Zemeckis, like, he filmed all this stuff, and he probably has like hours of additional things on top of this, but he knew exactly how long to focus on Tom Hanks, like drinking water from a leaf or filling up coconuts or focusing on coconuts before stabbing crabs and realizing if you don't cook them that their insides are just goop. Like that kind of stuff, and how much do you need to do before you get to the point where he figures out how to cook a crab, right? So that was going to be my next question, was like, do you have a favorite pre 4 years later moment, and if you do, what is it and why? I guess.
All right, say the question one more time.
So the chunk of the movie when he crashes to when he knocks his own tooth out, do you have a favorite moment in that chunk? And I'm sure we all do. I'm curious if we have the same one, if we have different ones, or
I have an ineffectual one and like a funny one.
All right, so why don't you go first then?
I guess it's not ineffectual. It's probably the most effective turning point for the whole thing. He is using shale to do something, and it breaks, and he realizes that he can use that as it's very caveman. It's very caveman the way he learns different things in this movie. And when that breaks and it forms like a thing that he can get the coconut now open with, sharper point. Yeah. The other thing is, it's kind of connected to this. I don't know if he has the skates yet at this point, but when he climbs to the top and he sees the pilot that washes up, and then he takes the pilot and he takes his shoes off and he puts his shoes up to his feet, and he realizes that his feet are too big. But then the next shot is him in the shoes with the toes.
Yeah, he's like sleeping with his toes hanging out.
Toes cut out. I've always loved that, and I think I think those sort of tie together.
Yeah, he made some sick, like, the bro sandals that like hockey players and shit wear in the shower room. Like, he made a pair of those. Yeah. Like the Nike swoop sandals. Or flip flops, I guess.
I have a pair of those, actually.
A lot of people do. No, those are both good ones, and I'm glad, because none of them are the ones that I would have chose. Tim, do you have one?
I hope it's not someone else. It's something someone else chose. But when he's trying to start the fire and ends up sliding the wood piece out, and it slices up his hand, and he just has this enormous meltdown.
Yeah.
And finally he has this explosion of emotions that he's been feeling this whole time. Yeah. And it's been like leading up with like the coconuts falling at nighttime and all that, all these little things that have been like adding onto the pile. And then and that is something as the kind of adult I am these days, I can not 100% associate with, but where you just feel that I like, and this too, and that's enough to set me off about every little thing that's piled up along the way.
Yeah.
And
You're never gonna believe what happened to me today, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's a part of what made me appreciate this so very differently watching this now versus as a 17-year-old, that that was a very emotionally complex moment, because his outburst had nothing to do with the cut on his hand. It had to do with everything up to that point. Yeah. And it's a great punctuating point in the movie where much like the shell rock that you mentioned, Jason, where it's a part of his learning curve, and that he's got to kind of go through his lumps first in order to kind of let go of his old life to work on this new one that he's stuck with. And but you can't do that without a little bit of emotional frustration, I guess. So yeah, that part in particular stood out to me.
For some reason, pain is the best inspiration, which sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Kaylin, why don't you continue on into your favorite moment?
He also grabs Wilson and throws him, and that's where we get Wilson.
Yeah, and that's the formation of Wilson. Yeah, the birth of Wilson through pain.
Pain and suffering.
Fucking scene stealer. Gosh.
I know.
So as a whole, I like his progression. Like, you know, with anything, you get thrown into some new environment or circumstance or situation, and you just kind of naturally start with basic things. And then when, you know, through trial and error, those actions, you see what the outcome or reaction is, and then you build on that, and build on that. And I really love how they showed that progression. But one thing, one of the scenes or whatever that made me laugh the most was his very first attempt to try and catch a fish, where he's just like running sporadically on the
leaping at them,
throws the spear at it.
He's not throwing the spear all that poorly either, though. He is like
it was when you see his 4 years of spear with the 3 points.
Worst attempt, like rustling all the water and everything. So I'll submit that as my answer to your question.
All right. I mean, mine's a little bit obvious and on the nose, but it's like, you know, he hasn't spoken a word other than "hello, who's there?" the whole time, like this entire time. And the only reason he's doing it is because he hears coconuts falling out of the trees at night, right? And he's terrified.
Yeah. Oh, can I just say another Mandela effect about this movie? I fucking went into this, and when that happens, he's like, "What's that in the woods?" I thought there was a boar fight in this movie.
That's because you watched
Lost.
I think it was Lost. It's just because of Lost, right?
That's not a Mandela effect. You just watched Lost.
Yeah. I don't believe in the Mandela effect. I just thought that this movie had a boar fight that I was waiting for literally the whole movie.
I'm sure you're not the only person that puts in Castaway and you're like, I can't wait till he fights the boar. Like even Tom Hanks is like, I'm pretty sure I fought a boar in this. But it's the moment where right after Tim's moment, which, you know, obviously without the moment that you chose, Tim, this moment would not be as powerful or potent, which is that he cleans his hands out, he goes back, and then he gives Wilson a little face, puts it on the thing, and then goes right back to it. You know, and he puts bubble wrap down to make his knees more comfortable, and he starts to go at it again. And then he, you know, the first thing he says to Wilson is like, "It wouldn't happen to have a light, would you?" And like, you know, he's he's doing that just to make himself feel more comfortable in the moment, which is like, and it's also a moment of levity for the audience because you haven't heard him say anything in so long.
You guys have inner monologues, right? Like in real life, you guys have inner monologues, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And you know, in that moment, he's looking over at Wilson the whole time, and he starts to, like, you know, kind of chat with him, and then what he's trying to do and has been trying to do succeeds, and he realizes what went wrong when he couldn't do it because it goes out immediately, and he realizes why it went out, so he fixes it. But he's like describing what he needs to do to fix it to the volleyball, and then he does it, and he, you know, has his massive freak out, which leads to the, like, in my opinion, the best part in the entire movie, which is when he makes the fire, and he's you know, it cuts from him like slowly putting little bits onto it to just this massive bonfire where he's like clearly had all this wood stocked up probably for days, where he's like, once I get the fire going, I can just make this huge fire and keep it going forever. And after that, it cuts to, you know, him in a cave talking to Wilson, having like a full conversation. And one of the interesting facts about this movie is that, like, they wrote all of Wilson's response dialogue like for Tom Hanks to read, so that he would know what he was kind of hearing in his own head sort
Yeah.
of thing. So it wasn't just like,
Yeah.
which is like, if you ever talk to yourself out loud, you have that voice in your head that like responds to what you're saying. And then you like, sometimes will be like, yeah, shut up.
Hell yeah.
You dumbass.
I talk to myself while playing video games like so much. It's like so
Yeah.
much.
Sometimes I'll talk to myself. I do it in the shower a lot, where I'm just like, oh, you son of a bitch. How dare you say that about me?
Also, to, like, sometimes if you've been playing video games for hours and you need to break the silence, like, I haven't said anything in a while. You just start reacting for like a minute, and then you go right back into just like inner monologue.
So my main reason to ask you that question is, you know, I think we can all agree that Tom Hanks is like, he's a very, very good actor, and he's been in many, many a good movie. And this was, I think, like one of several nominations for Academy Awards, two of which I think he'd already won for like Philadelphia and Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump, yeah.
Also directed by Robert Zemeckis, but this was like his next Oscar nomination. I don't think he won for this, but he was nominated.
He didn't, but he got the best actor in a drama in the Golden Globes.
Yeah, and then I don't think that he was nominated again for like 20 years after this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Not even for Sully. Sully Sullenberger.
Did you guys notice? So he has his tantrum. He throws Wilson. He notices it kind of looks like a face a little bit. He has his hand wrapped up. And first he wipes the sweat from his forehead. And then he licks it.
Yeah. I noticed that too. I was like, what are you doing?
I think that's just like a goofy thing where it's like he's got the moisture, but then he doesn't realize like that he did that. So he's like,
almost like a habit or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my question was going to be like, do you have a favorite Tom Hanks performance? You don't have to go into why, but like, do you have, because I think this is one of his great, because it's nonverbal. It's all based on emotion. And like, there's no music the entire time he's on the island.
That fact alone makes this phenomenal. That
there's no music. Well, it's because
music is no dialogue, that there's little to no score. It's his
there is no score while he's on the island at all.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to talk about sound design. We'll get to it, but yes.
Yeah, I think, like movie score is obviously there as a tool, but I think that while they were making this movie, it's like they didn't want to cheat because they're like, we don't want to give you any twinkling hope with like a they just want it to be like, if you feel hope, we want it to be Tom Hanks conveying hope in his eyes and his noises that he makes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, back to I think Tim, you might have mentioned it, but this movie is grounded in reality, right? They to have a musical score or musical tune or whatever to elicit an emotion in an audience takes you out of, or not to say it takes you out of, but it kind of makes you realize this is a movie. Whereas, as I mentioned earlier, when movie magic is seamless, when it's like invisible, when you don't even realize it, that's, a mark of some amazing shit.
Well, it's a magic trick at that point where you're like, wait a minute, you cast a spell on me. Which is, the moment when he knocks his tooth out and then it pans down to the flames and then the flames turn into water and then you see that horrifying CG fish, which actually doesn't look that bad. But then it like gets stabbed and it pans up slowly to him standing on a rock and he's like putting his hand down slowly and he just looks like a scary man. You're like, this guy fucking... So he like Jason, you were saying, he leveled up probably about 20 levels since we last saw him knocking his tooth out with a skate right in his mouth.
Would you guys? Okay, let me ask.
Wait. We got to answer the Tom Hanks question. Do you have a favorite Tom Hanks movie that isn't Castaway? And I will be right back. We'll start.
I'll go
with
next.
Jason.
You're not going to listen to our answers. You're going to leave
well,
us.
I mean, I'm sure I'll get back before Jason's done.
You can watch the playback. It's fine.
I will say that I think that he's most transcendent in a couple of movies. One obviously is a classic that we've all seen. I think that if you don't mention this, you've got to really consider what you think is a good movie and what is a bad movie. And that film, of course, is Turner and Hooch.
I assume
That
that's
ending.
a joke, but that's a funny joke.
But that ending though, that ending is a lot to get through though.
That's
in Turner
true.
and
He
Hooch.
did act with a dog. That is hard to do. That is a joke. My obvious answer is Forrest Gump. But that's like too obvious. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood I did see recently, and he fucking was so good in that. He was so good. I wouldn't say he was better than Castaway, because this is like a later Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is kind of like not... Like, he's still a great actor, but he doesn't have to be anymore, so he doesn't... You know, he doesn't... You don't get that same response, but I felt like...
Let his son do it.
Well, he's not a good actor, unfortunately. He's fine.
I
He's
think
like
Colin Hanks is okay.
He's like
but
a
he's not
sitcom,
great, yeah.
kind of
he's
a sitcom
no Tom
guy.
Hanks.
Yeah. He is young.
It's not the same.
He is
He's
young,
a lesser
though. He's in
Hanks.
his bosom buddies, period, I guess.
Yo, Orange County, hilarious.
Yeah, but that's
Okay.
Orange County. It's a Jack Black movie.
Yeah.
But Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I thought that he made me think about my childhood for 2 solid hours. So, you know, I think that's a worthy mention of being up there with one of his best performances.
That's actually was going to be my answer as well, and still is, because there's actually one part in that movie, especially where it is so incredibly nuanced that when I was watching, I was thinking they should be showing this to other people who want to learn how to act and say this is where the watermark is, and it was
his rage issues that
when they're interviewing, when he's being interviewed and they're asking Mr. Rogers about some of the history with his sons, and without even spelling out what those issues were, just seeing within like a second, like 7 or 8 different emotions wash over his face, in a lot of these like little micro expressions, and it's just like you have to have such you'd have to have a lot of that on tap in order to do that in that one shot. And it's without dialogue and in that one little expression, and there's nothing happening music-wise or anything else to really inform the audience of anything else that is happening. It's just Tom Hanks's face doing all the work in this movie for this one moment, and it really kills it.
he says.
And
He says at one point something along the lines of like, everybody gets angry, and even I get angry sometimes. But you get the impression that what had happened in his life that they don't show in the movie is he used to have really bad anger issues and learned that if he just is centered, you know, he can sort of get around that. And I think I agree. I know the scene you're talking about, and it's fucking like I remember going into that movie being like, ugh. This might be a disappointment. Like this might, because Tom Hanks, like I said, he hasn't done anything like huge in a long time, and that movie blew me away.
Yeah, I think like to that movie's detriment, like it's Tom Hanks and he's surrounded by a lot of people that some are kind of phoning it in. The main guy does a pretty good job, but there's other people in the movie where it's just like they're not up to bat as much as he is at the moment.
Yeah, I think also like the way that the story is told in that movie is super beneficial to him as a character actor, because you're not really having to focus too much on him. It's almost like hearsay from every other character just talking about how great Mr. Rogers is, and then this guy who's like sort of like he's almost like speculative to like Mr. Rogers' powers, and then he's being entranced by them as well. And like halfway through the movie, he's like, "This man is a genius. And he's making me feel like a human again." Yeah, it's a good movie.
So you're saying I should check out that movie?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yes,
it's fantastic. Timeless.
Well, like in a weird kind of reversal with Castaway, I think there's only one scene in the movie that doesn't really, or like outside of the initial beginning leading to Moscow. After that, there's only one other scene in the movie that doesn't have Tom Hanks in it.
Yeah,
and I think
that's the thing that this movie did that was really cool is they don't just cut back to like Helen Hunt a whole bunch of times, and they could have totally done that. Like,
except when she picks up the phone and then passes out, which I think is the only scene, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, is that the scene you're talking about, Tim?
Yes, I didn't want to necessarily hit the gas so soon, but no, that's the scene I was thinking of. Yeah,
it is also like super powerful because she's got that mom haircut, and then she falls over, and it pans over
I like
to like
Helen Hunt with short hair.
Okay, it's great.
She does look good.
Kaylin, why don't you tell us your pick?
So when you asked us in the group chat, obviously the first thing that came to mind was Forrest Gump, which great performance. Another one that came to mind was Big, which was a childhood movie for me. It touched on a lot of things that, you know, a fucking toy like a toy business. You make toys and stuff. Like, how awesome is that? Another one that came to mind was A League of Their Own.
Durak actually mentioned that in the chat. He, a friend of the show, Durak, said that Tom Hanks was really good in A League of Their Own, also other movies, but his character in that one was hilarious. And that one, of course, is There's No Crying. Steve, can you give us the There's No Crying in Baseball in your excellent impression?
There's no crying in baseball.
Perfect. Perfect.
But what I'm going to submit is Cloud Atlas.
Oh.
That's a weird one, but also, you know, a pretty good movie.
There's parts of it that I love and parts of it that I don't, but yeah, like he's actually
parts of it that I like and parts of it that I'm like, what the fuck is going on in this movie? Keith David is an Asian man all of a sudden?
Nope.
Well, I mean, I have a soft spot in my heart for Philadelphia because it was one of the first sort of like queer movies that like a queer represented person was like represented as like an actual person for me that I had watched and been like, oh, queer people are real and not just like caricatures that exist in movies to be clowns.
Everyone had matching towels is sort of how queers were represented before Philadelphia a lot of the time.
And it also is like a really heart-wrenching story that does not have a happy ending. So it's not one that I'm like, you guys got to check out Philadelphia. It's going to make you feel great at the end of the day. I do also, I know that The Green Mile is kind of like not great in terms of like what it represents with like people of color versus, you know, like old timey storytelling, but it is a really good performance from Tom Hanks. He's kind of killing it. And I also do like Michael Clark Duncan, and he didn't really have a lot of roles after that movie, and he also was killing it in that movie, even though he's playing sort of like the stereotypical like magical black man, which sucks. But at the same time, hey, this is Stephen King, and that's he writes what he knows. He's like, every black person I've ever met is magical. What do you mean?
Stephen King has like 3 gears, and he's very good at them. So just let him cook.
I'm actually reading The Stand right now, and it's only 2 of the 3 gears so far. But anyway,
you're like, when is he gonna hit that 3rd one? But also, a lot of the other performances in that movie are really, really good as well. Sam Rockwell, and you know, all sorts of other people.
Sam Rockwell,
but I don't know, man. I think this is probably one of his best, other than Boz. What are you doing, Boz? Toy Story, man. Nobody likes Toy Story.
I was gonna say Toy Story, but I wanted to
Toy
go
Story's
off the
good.
path.
Or how about when he played himself in 30 Rock? No, but you know, there's other movies like, you know, the Spielberg movies are really good. Road to Perdition's pretty good. There's
Bridge of Spies is okay, yeah.
Dragnet.
What's
There's
that
Catch Me
one
If You
on the
Can.
boat?
Catch Me If You
Captain
Can, yeah.
something.
Captain Phillips.
Yeah.
I've never seen that.
I haven't actually seen that either.
Yeah.
And it's mostly because I heard it wasn't good, but there was like issues with it.
It's a good movie, but it's not like, again, like we were saying earlier, like there's movies where you could rewatch like minutes later, the next day, the next week, like you would be down to do that. Where that one it's a good movie, but it's like it doesn't have necessarily the replayability that like popcorn movies have or whatever.
Well, I think the issue that I had with that was that like the movie was made a little bit too close to the incident, and then they found out a bunch of like really horrifying stuff about the actual character of Captain Phillips, and I was like, oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't watch this.
You've got
Do you
mail.
guys think you would ever take a skate to your mouth?
Oh my god, that whole shit made me feel like he had no other recourse but to knock his own tooth out. They show the abscess; it's fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think you could do it though?
I think I could if I was in enough pain.
If
I'd
it
have
fast
to.
forwarded my life for 4 years, probably
4
I
years.
think
Yeah.
I could handle
He's
it.
not
Well,
at 4
like-
years yet, though. This is before the 4 years.
I've
He
had
knocks
like
his tooth
I've
out,
had
and then it's 4 years later.
yeah. I've
Yeah.
had like really bad mouth pain before, and it sometimes just like knocks you out in the same way that a severe flu would knock
Or
you
like
out.
a horrible migraine.
Yeah.
Where you just can't do anything because you're discombobulated and paralyzed by your own face. Where you're like, I can't. It's too sore.
Yeah. Well, it was getting to the point where it was getting in the way of him eating and swallowing, and and that was like as we were saying before, that like his life has gotten so out of his life's kind of gotten out of control to the point where it's not until he's under absolute duress and incredible pain that he'll do something about it.
Yeah, he even
And,
said multiple times he hates dentists.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
where we
great.
also-
that my dentist back home's name is Spalding.
yeah.
Also,
Keep going.
speaking of Wilson, I wrote this note down to just go back one segment. Sorry, but I wrote the sequence goes. He opens the packages, finds the skates, makes a weapon to hunt crab, realizes crabs are goo, cuts himself, throws Wilson, finds Wilson, makes fire, then names Wilson, and then when he names Wilson, he says Wilson for the first time. A thunder claps. Which, when you're watching this for the first time, obviously you wouldn't pick up on that. But Wilson became a pop culture phenomenon to the point that you could go buy a Wilson ball with that handprint on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they made like an actual ball and like officially printed it that you could buy for like years. Yeah.
I remember it.
Which is kind of like an action figure.
It's
this
the
movie.
Wilson action figure, absolutely. So I really thought that the thunderclap when he says, "Oh, you're Wilson" or whatever he says, like
I think he says, "So Wilson."
So
like
Wilson.
he just talks to him like Wilson already introduced himself to him like a couple minutes ago, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was also gonna ask if you guys have a favorite Zemeckis, but maybe we should get into the second half.
Yeah, we're past 11 here.
I know, but I kind of figured this movie would go a little bit later, but I will try and just kind of zoom through the rest of the Zoom.
Cool.
So we did our Castaway, like our Hanks's.
To answer your question, Back to the Future is my favorite Zemeckis. That's
Oh,
Probably my most rewatched.
Did we do
but
that question already?
we
no,
We're doing it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, we don't
Jason
let's not
answered.
do why. We can just sort of do it.
yeah, that's fine. So Jason's is Back to the Future. Which one? The first one?
I like Back to the Future 2 better than Back to the Future 1, but Back to the Future
figured
1.
you would, because Jason loves that moment where Jaws 3D tries to bite a guy.
Yeah. Well, I just
That's
love
his favorite part.
it's my favorite sequel ever because it's a rare, like, great sequel, not just an
It is a
okay
good
sequel.
Yeah, true.
And it
yeah.
also, I love in time travel shit where they go back to, like, moments.
back to back to back.
No, like I like when he's like in the background of a bunch of scenes from the first movie. I love
Yeah.
that stuff. Like in the Avengers movies where they're like jumping around, all around time and going back to moments.
I like when they go back and then they fuck things up so hard that the future gets all fucked up and they're like,
Also
what have
that,
we done?
yeah.
Donald Trump is president somehow.
Somehow.
Kind of.
And the timelines almost perfectly match up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say the Back to the Future series for sure, and Forrest Gump as well. But like a different levels of appreciation as time has gone on, because there's funny things here and there. But like Back to the Future, it's just, as far as rhythm and beat goes, it's just a lot of fun.
I'm going next. Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh,
Favorite Robert Zemeckis movie.
I didn't even know that was a Robert Zemeckis movie, but that movie
I can
fucking
love
rules,
that
too.
movie so goddamn much. I watch that movie like once a year, and I have since I was like 7. I've always owned it on DVD or VHS or Blu-ray, and now it's on Disney Plus. So sometimes I'll just be like tired Be like, I need to watch Bob Hoskins yell at him.
The first time he does a Brooklyn accent.
That laughing.
That is a great movie.
I'm realizing now that they cast Bob Hoskins for Mario because of Roger Rabbit. They
Likely
have.
Yeah, probably, but also nobody gives a shit about the Mario Brothers movie.
Hey,
not even you do. You like to pretend you do, but how many times have you watched that movie?
I watch that one
Twice.
every couple of years. Actually, I always want to check again. Is it as bad as people say?
Is it good this time, or no? It's still really bad.
They're like you talk about chicken like it's a shut-in.
It's got some pacing issues, but it's a solid watch.
Hello, Mario Brothers movie. Are you okay in there? Yeah, we're still eating soup. Get out of here.
Yeah.
I brought you some Hungry Mans.
Good, because we are both hungry men in here. Me and my brother, Luigi Mario.
But Who Framed Roger Rabbit? It's another Alan Silvestri soundtrack for that. But for that one, I hear a mixture of both Predator and Back to the Future while I listen to that soundtrack.
That's like last month we did, or last week we did Event Horizon, which is Alan Silvestri, and I heard he's jacking a little bit of Star Wars in there, and Steve was like, "No,
I heard some Matrix in there."
Listen, guys. They're all pulling from like classic composers of like the 17th century. They're not jacking anything from anybody. You guys are like, they think they're all these like orchestral thieves, like composers who are like, we got to get into the Silvestri bank and steal his interlude to this specific movie.
The only original composer is Ludwig Göransson, who does the Star Wars movies.
Who's jacking culturally from every culture that exists other than classic, like, European composers.
He plays whatever that instrument in the Mandalorian.
The reason that I like Who Framed Roger Rabbit is because it did something that has only very recently been achieved, which is, like, compiling universes that we love and showing them on screen together. And it was like a crazy thing to me as a kid, and they'll never be able to accomplish it in the same way again, where they're crossing IPs and having these handshake deals and like stuff that I didn't even know about when I was a kid. But I was like, Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse are both parachuting next to Bob Hoskins, and Mickey Mouse is like, I think he's gonna kill himself. Like, they're never gonna have Mickey Mouse making a suicide joke ever again, you know?
I'm surprised Big Disney didn't come over and be like, cut that out of that movie. We'll put it on Disney Plus, but you got to cut that shit
I think
out.
Big Disney was like, that's hilarious at the time, because it was like what's
they
his
were
name?
failing at the
Eisner
time.
was just like, listen, we need to get a little more edge on our characters here.
Because that was a Touchstone movie at the time too, and Touchstone was the darker Disney stuff.
But Disney wasn't
Also, the viewers grow
complete
up.
nosedive at the time.
Kaylin, what's your favorite Zemeckis movie?
If I could, prior to answering that question, just to add on to your question earlier about the segment from landing to before the 4-year skip, when he's collecting the packages and then he finds a package with a dress and then he holds it up to himself, I enjoyed quite a bit.
That was fun. That was a good little visual gag.
Yeah. To answer your question, though, so I'm actually a little ashamed with myself for not knowing more of I know his work and I have it, but not knowing that he was the one that did it. But when you posited the question in the group chat and I looked him up, there's
what's the movie? God damn it! Jesus,
get
it. You don't know his filmography. What the fuck movie is it?
Okay, so you guys gave good some answers, great answers.
It's not the Polar Express, is it?
I will submit Matchstick Men.
Matchstick Men, okay.
Okay. That's
Matchstick Men is a very fun movie.
All right.
With Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell. I forget the girl's name, I'm sorry.
Wasn't John Goodman in that as well?
Allison Lohman, I'm looking at it now.
Not that I recall.
I've only seen that movie once.
A fun little twisty turny, what's it called when you psych him out or whatever?
Who done it?
Yeah.
It's a who done it. Okay, interesting answer. Like I'm not familiar enough with that movie to like confirm or deny that it's great.
You've never
bad.
been?
I've seen it. I just
Hey,
have only seen it one time, like
it's
a
got
long time
Dwight's. It's got Dwight's babysitter / girlfriend in it.
ago. Oh, she's in a lot of movies.
She is in like every movie.
All right, cool. That's
all, folks. My favorite part of this movie was. Sorry.
Well, I'm just going through my notes and making sure that we have already talked about the stuff that I thought would be worth talking about. Which I think we have.
I think the first.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Oh, did you guys know that? Sorry, go ahead.
What were you saying?
The movie was shot in 2 chunks, obviously, because they had to have a huge physical transformation.
I wanted to talk about that a little bit. How his physical transformation is like crazy. It's so.
They
good.
had to take an 8-month break in between the two to
I feel like his
allow
hair
him to
would be
do that.
longer after 4 years.
Maybe he's cutting it off with like the
Rock?
Like you can't like he doesn't have scissors, so he's like using the skate to like cut it off.
Was he doing the same thing with his mustache?
Maybe he just can't grow a mustache.
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
There's actually a thing where your hair stops growing where it splits and starts breaking off and deteriorating from there. That's why when people are trying to grow their hair out, they have to actually cut off their split ends to grow it out more.
Growth.
Yeah. So there actually is a capped length of hair naturally without cutting.
God
And
bless
also,
you, Tim. Thanks
he
for
had
being
no. Well, he had no hair products on top of that, so like he wasn't regularly washing his hair and his beard.
Yo,
like,
hair products aren't good for you. I'm going on record right now. Cancel me if you want. This is a hot take.
I don't know if that is. I'm pretty sure people have been saying that since the beginning of hair products being invented.
Yeah, it cleans all.
There's
the
a
natural
stinky
grease.
old man who was like, "Those things will kill you." And everyone was like, "You smell." You need to wash your beard, Granddad. It smells like gravy and like bad old gravy.
It smells like the soup we had a month ago.
like gravy and bad old gravy.
That's the gravy from last year's thing.
There's layers of gravy in this here beard.
So the interesting fact was that Robert Zemeckis did this thing where he was like, I want to make these 2 movies, but I need to take this huge gap in between in order to like get Tom Hanks to acting condition for the second chunk of the movie.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll scale down the movie that I'm going to make, and I'll spend the majority of the budget on 2 stars. And he got Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer to star in the movie What Lies Beneath. And he just made a little short little haunted house movie in between filming the first and second halves of Castaway.
I think
And
that's
you know
great.
what? That movie also did very, very well. So he just like made
That's a
like
banger
$1 billion
cast.
for
I kind of want to watch that.
and he filmed them in like the course of like a year and a half. Like he filmed he was like a machine. It's crazy. And I think that's the reason now that they keep letting him do all these fucked up CGI movies that nobody actually likes. They're like, hey Rob, can you go back to making a Castaway and What Lies Beneath?
No,
I want to make a movie starring Jim Carrey where he plays every ghost and Scrooge and the little kids and all of them. It's gonna be Jim Carrey going nuts. And even Jim Carrey's is like, I don't know if I can do this. But he did it.
What a series of unfortunate events.
Oh my God! Is What Lies Beneath like a romantic horror?
It's like a movie where like a ghost like possesses Harrison Ford to like cheat on his wife or some shit, and then his wife is like, "You're cheating on me," and he's like, "I'm not cheating on you. I was having sex with you." And it turns out he was like having sex with a ghost or something, and then she gets possessed by a ghost. I don't know. It's like a Hitchcock movie basically, where everybody's mistrusting each
like
other.
That movie
and
where
there's a lot of sex involved.
like that movie where Anna de Armas and her friend go to
fucking Keanu Reeves
house, and
dope.
he used to cheat all the time, but he can't cheat. But the two world's hottest ladies show up at his door all soaked.
I don't think it's so like that. No. I think it's a little bit different.
The movie's so fucking bad, dude.
Well, I think that What Lies
Beneath is a Skinamax movie.
Yeah. What Lies Beneath has like a pretty decent sort of like fan or like, you know, people who liked it when it came out. And but I think I saw it once and I was like, I don't get the appeal other than that Han Solo's in this movie.
Maybe
The only
And
reason I like
Catwoman.
this. Yeah, and
Han Solo,
Catwoman.
Dangerous
Catwoman.
Minds.
Dangerous Minds.
So-
that's the word I was looking for the other day.
Let's fly through because like one of the great things about the fat Tom Hanks versus like the skinny Tom Hanks, which is like like the leveled up version, is like that first chunk of Tom Hanks feels like it could be like a week or like a week and a half or something, and then that last Tom Hanks also feels like it could be like a week or a week and a half or like a month or something.
4
And then
weeks.
there's 4 years in between where it's like you can just fill that void. Like you don't need to see any of it. They didn't need to be like 2 years later, a year later, 3 years later,
Yeah.
then
That's
him
what I
building the raft. Like you
started
can
to
fill
say,
in the
like,
blanks.
you
All
get-
they needed to show was him nailing a fucking fish from a 10 feet away.
And just
hitting it.
pose it.
We
Yeah,
do
it-
get to
perfect.
we do get to find out what the most traumatic thing that happens to him is during that
Yeah.
time, and that's him staging his own suicide. But the suicide would have failed. He wanted
Yeah.
to test it. He gets up.
This
there.
is also the other Mandela I wanted to talk to you guys about.
Well, I'll just finish what happens basically. Wilson is constantly reminding him that he almost ended his own life. And the way that he did it was he made like a stick figure man out of a log and threw it with the rope.
I think the log was already shaped like that.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, but you could call it an effigy because it has arms.
It's kind of an
and a head.
effigy, yeah.
Yeah.
And he determined that if he had done it, it would have snapped. Like he went to the top of the peak. We didn't talk about the peak at all. The peak on this island is one of my favorite parts because the first time he goes up there, he really sees that he's alone. Like there's nothing anywhere. He can't see anything in any direction. But he goes up there. He climbs up there. He throws the effigy. It breaks the branch, and he realizes that what would have happened wouldn't have been a quick instant death, but he would have instead fallen to the rocks below and potentially bled out, which is not a death that he wanted. He's kind of a wuss of a guy, He kind of wants everything.
But yeah, you don't really find that much detail out until later. Like you know that like he's like, I don't want to go back up there. The weight would have snapped it. I would have, whatever. But but Wilson is basically telling him like, there's 30 feet of extra rope up there, and he's like, I'm going to be short on the rope, so I need to go up there
because he's trying
and
to
get the
build
rope.
this raft to leave.
Yeah.
And you don't find out until after he's left the island when he's talking to his friend that like he made the noose and he wanted to test it because he knew that if I don't test it, there's a chance that I could fuck it up and I could break my legs or my back and just like have to lie there bleeding out for days, which is like a way worse death.
He does mention he does mention back on the island that to Wilson because he's having a back and forth with Wilson where he does say that like he doesn't go into the detail he does with Bobby.
Again, this is you filling the blanks in your head, which is like
which
the
is
whole 4-year gap is
Yeah.
you doing that, and then he's having a mild conversation with Wilson where he's not specifically saying I went up there to kill myself, but you get it. Like
do you guys
understand
think so I thought of something when he was making the rope, and I guess he runs out of the particular plant he was using to make the rope sort of. Do you think it's possible that he could have run out of like supplies around the island eventually?
Well, if he wasn't planting things, right, and like I don't know how long it takes. I mean, he would have been able to catch fish forever, right? I assume. Like, if it's one person hunting fish on an
like
island
one
of
fish
that
and
size,
one crab every day,
yeah, like he
But
would
could
be
he-
able to.
Do you think he
What other
lived there for
supplies do you need,
40
though?
years? Do you think he could have burned down all? Because a tree takes 40 years to grow, right? So do you think he could have clear cut the whole island eventually
For
firewood?
firewood?
And, yeah.
Maybe,
Like
but
a hut, you only need once.
I think
right?
he probably would have died before, because like you eventually you're going to get too old to be able to do certain things.
True.
and You'll just like
And
cut
too
yourself.
sick.
Yeah. Like,
You'll get ill by something because who's to say what's going to happen? Like, and just fish, just crab forever. Like, it's going to wreck your digestive system. But like eventually he was just going to wear out and die anyway, no matter what.
Also, fuck a gym membership. Go get stranded on an island. You want to lose? You want to get fit? Go
do
try
the
and survive.
castaway diet.
I assume they did the second half of the movie first, and then he bulked up to do the first half of the movie.
I believe, yeah.
I thought it was reversed, but I think you might be right.
It's way easier to put on weight than it is to lose weight.
Yeah.
would've
It
taken
could have been that he
longer.
had to do the first part first and then the second. But I know that he didn't do anything between, so like I don't actually know. That would be so intimidating though, where they're like, you gotta lose all your fucking chub, bud, for the second half. 8 months.
Well, some of it, I think he put on weight though for that part of it, right? For that part of the character, like he put on extra, like
a lot,
like 50 pounds. Yeah.
He's looking like he's been eating Wendy's and Russian McDonald's or whatever for a while.
Can we give a shout out to the cool sundial calendar in the cave?
Yeah,
I like
it's crazy that he was able to. Those are the other parts where you're like, okay, this guy's on another level of like being able to track the sun and shit. Like, I would maybe do that eventually, but I think in 4 years I would maybe just start to be like, wait a minute. I wouldn't have already had a full chart made.
I wish there was a throwaway line or something that he asks what the date is and goes like, I was off by this much or something.
Nice.
Like that.
Yeah.
I was only off by like 2 days.
No, all he wanted was a Dr. Pepper and some ice.
That's true.
Yeah, this guys like Dr. Pepper.
I
love it.
Dr. Pepper.
It's my favorite drink.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Dr. Pepper and rum.
Why are you ruining your rum?
What? Why
are you ruining your Dr. Pepper? My question.
Yeah, peanut butter in my chocolate.
Yeah, I think that second half, though, it's cool that he's like now having like full conversations with Wilson and like he's, he hasn't lost his mind. I think that anybody would argue that if anything, him realizing he can talk to a volleyball is like him maintaining his sanity. Like if he didn't have that volleyball, he would probably be like not speaking English anymore. He'd be like,
It's also a good little cheat code. Like, so one, it plays into the story for that fact alone of keeping his sanity, right? But it also is kind of like a cheat code to keep the audience engaged,
to have
right?
dialogue in the movie.
Yeah,
it was a genius thing.
Toddlers do it in a way. It's a part of acknowledging your own identity is to acknowledge identities around you, and like I think the music score doesn't actually start until he comes across the whale, which is the first living thing to look at him since he crashed on the island.
The first moment that the score kicks in is when he crashes over that last wave, and then he looks
when he's just past the crest of the
it's when he's like looking at the island moving away from him, and then it's like that's where you're like and that's where like essentially the movie Castaway ends, and now we're in a new movie which is like cast toward civilization.
So the Home Alone of it all usually happens late in the movie, but the Home Alone of it all just happens for 90 minutes in the center of the movie, and then the Home Alone of it all ends.
I think this is one of those movies that has like fucking 12 Home Alones of it all going on throughout.
Did you guys feel it was like bittersweet when he was looking back at the island?
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely,
he did too, right?
I survived this place. It was like my home or whatever, right? Like a home away from home or whatever.
Well, he also knows that like there's a good chance that he's not going to survive what he's doing.
Well, I mean, we're all going to die eventually, but do you want to die alone on an island, or do you want to die trying to get back to your life?
Or do you want to die with a whale, a big CGI whale, in the middle of the freaking ocean?
I think the implication there, though,
to like rent a whale or something. Couldn't they just get a shot of a real whale?
Did you ask if they could rent a whale?
I think the implication of that whale, though, that's interesting to me that I kind of learned is the whale keeps like waking him up at all these like crucial moments.
Yeah, I think the implication is that
the whale is now
sort of like
starts following him and is almost like his guardian angel sort of character.
I think, so like, you know that when the wings fly away, that whale is like supposed to be like the wings coming back, and it's like an angel looking over him, and like I would assume it's the same whale that's just following him and being like, who's this motherfucker floating around?
I mean, whales are supposed to be super intelligent too, right?
It'd be great if a whale came up and had the little porta potty like as a hat.
That's like a Studio Ghibli. I want to see the Studio Ghibli. I want to see the Studio Ghibli version of this movie that just has all kinds of crazy shit like that.
This is like a obviously the moment when Wilson goes out into the ocean is like, it's a very heavy moment, and then like it shows him like weeping for, I would assume, like a full day, if not several days, of just like crying about Wilson being gone. I also, Mandela, remember like a shark showing up. I'm like, isn't there a shark that shows up at some point? But it's like, no, I'm just like putting every other shark movie in my head. It's like, no,
you're putting every raft. There's a raft in Lost where they try to raft out of there. So it might be another one of those moments. I think they deal with sharks on that as well. Do they deal with sharks and then the others?
But then there's also the point where Wilson says, we're going to need a bigger raft. And I was like, Wilson, chill out.
I know you've seen Jaws 47 times. Sorry, Tim.
Well, yeah, I was just saying, I think that everyone watching this movie was almost half expecting, well, there's got to be a shark scene. And that would have been the easy thing to write into the movie, but then it would just get wackier and weirder at that point.
It's like 1,000 times better that a whale is almost maybe escorting him to like an oil or what, like a cargo ship lane. Yeah. And like the whales are probably, because whales are supremely intelligent creatures. Like they're not dumb fish. They're just like, if they see a thing, they're like, oh, I'll go back here at some point. And they probably were like curious or whatever, right? Seeing this guy, because like they came up and looked at him, and they're like, "There's a thing living on this raft. Like, let's go check this guy out every once in a while."
There's some stinky man on a raft here. What's going on?
It smells so bad. It smells like he hasn't washed his beard in like a fucking long time. And
But like the whales wake him up, as was pointed out, like as the cargo ship was coming past and all that kind of stuff. That like, they were kind of escorting him, and his last look at the island is almost like him kind of saying goodbye to, not necessarily a bad part of his life, but a part of his life that was becoming dysfunctional. That these familiar, comfortable things that he had become accustomed to, and then taking that step away from all that to actually make the effort to change. And it's scary, and you don't know what's going to happen, but you kind of have to shed that old life away in order to do that. So I kind of interpret that leaving the island behind and leaving behind Wilson was a part of leaving behind that life. That Wilson is a resident of that island, and
this, and it's if Wilson survives this, and now Chuck just has this fucking decrepit thing in his garage.
Into like the airport.
Under his arm.
Then he goes out into his garage and like talks. He's got like a new girlfriend. He's got the new girlfriend who made the thing. He goes out into the garage.
I got a good feeling about this one, Will.
Yeah.
He's like,
Helen Hunt shows up and she didn't remarry, and he's like, so this is my friend Wilson. I made friends on the island. She's like,
And then he has that monologue with Bobby where he's like, and I lost her all over again because I've got this weird decrepit person.
I heard a joke on like another podcast like years ago, which was like Wilson floats away, and they're like, it would be the craziest joke because if he came back and then he goes to the airport and Helen Hunt has Wilson and she's like, I got remarried to this volleyball. He's like, he showed up like 2 weeks ago and we just really hit it off.
He reminds me a lot of you, actually.
The strong silent type.
Yeah.
Yet I always know what he means.
I did want to mention that there are like several moments in the movie that like again build the pacing. The pacing builds it to ultimate tension, which is like he almost misses shit constantly, and as the audience you're like, oh god, you're gonna miss it, you're gonna fucking miss it, like when the ship is there and he's just like and it's like almost like the ship is about to leave and you see the people like talking to each other on the deck and he's like, Kelly, come on. But like when he goes to pee and he keeps looking around while he's peeing in the middle of the night and you just keep seeing the light blinking on the
what was that light?
Horizon. It's the shipping.
It's the ship.
Yeah. Oh. Like that's how far away it was. Like a light goes forever across the horizon, right? Like,
but the tiny flashlight does not.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Be like, it's not gonna work. But like that's
SOS.
It's Kalen. Like he keeps doing it until the battery goes out. He's like, fuck. But like that's why the first escape attempt is like pure desperation, right? Like he should know that like light can travel that far, but there's absolutely no way that he's gonna make it to that boat on that tiny little fucking rubber
and
raft.
even at that point, he's been looking at that at like not the horizon, but like the way that there's like a small wave and then a bigger wave, and then like when he gets to the actual ocean, there's a huge tidal wave that keeps happening.
Yeah,
he learned from that. At least he knew what he had.
But he
to
also
do.
learned like when he can go, because he's been watching it for years,
March
and he's
to
like,
April.
yeah, within these months, that giant wave is a lot smaller, and we can get through it easier.
And the wind.
The wind's going in the other direction.
Show don't tell.
Yeah,
when he has that little the fabric on the stick or whatever, and then then the wind changes.
Yeah. I liked that a lot.
It's a good movie, man. It's good. It's smart. It's fun. It's great. It's super depressing.
Question. He still had the paddles on the raft. Why didn't he paddle over to Wilson?
I think he was in desperation.
Yeah, no, at that point he had like one paddle on the raft. It was after the storm, right?
And it's all broken up. Like
Yeah.
I chalk that up to like desperation. If I don't get over to him now, he's gonna be gone.
Yeah.
Also, he's probably hungry as shit. He like didn't bring food with him. He fishes a little bit. Also, are fish at like the surface level of the ocean? Aren't they like?
There's different kinds of fish doing different things. Like that's why there's
that's why you're here.
that's why there's all sorts of like gulls that can go out far and do like as like ducks do like a little dive and get them.
Right. True. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this is where we get him back to the main world.
There's not. We kind of covered a lot of it. I think a big moment for me in this is when they have the little party for him, and everybody leaves, and he's sort of left with like the table of food, and he picks. And
you're
up
like, didn't they ask him what he would want for his own party?
He picks.
And it's like anything but crab legs, please. Yeah.
But huge crab legs.
It's a giant Dungeness crab leg. Like
he said he wants lots of crab legs. Like his friends aren't even listening to him.
But the other part that's great is he picks up a barbecue lighter and lights it.
Look how easy it is.
Yeah, and just
I did like that because it's like, you know, he's realizing the mundanity of things in this room. Even just this tiny room has everything that he could have needed to survive.
Another small moment like that is when he's in his hotel room and he's...
Wait, hold on. But why would there be a barbecue lighter in that room is the real question. Were they lighting like a birthday cake or some shit?
Just a lighter.
Why was that in there?
I assumed they had a little like fondue thing going or something like that.
Fondue or a cake. Congratulations on surviving 4 years on an island. It's your 4-year
Here's some fondue. We got you crab meat and a bunch of other raw fish on top of rice. Sushi, right?
Yo,
you probably like it
sushi,
because you were
right?
out there so long.
Did it look like the sushi was wrapped in electrical tape for you guys?
It'd be funny if it was, but that would be... It's probably just seaweed, but yeah.
But another moment that plays into this too is when he's almost like a man returning from war and has severe PTSD, because when they show him in the hotel room, all of his blankets are pulled off the bed. He's laying on the floor, and this happens to like actual veterans with PTSD. They can't handle like the softness of a bed. People that have been in prison for a long time, it happens to as well. He's laying on the floor. It looks the same as it was in his cave. He's got the timepiece open, and he's got a flashlight, or he's not a flashlight. He's turning the light on. He's turning the light on and off, like in that first moment. Which hit me hard. Like I don't know why it hit me so hard, but I was like, "Fuck, man! What a good." Like set him up and knock him down, Robert Zemeckis sort of moment.
I mean, human beings are like extremely capable, but they're like super fallible, and they're also like susceptible.
Our bodies want to do habits more than they don't want to do habits.
So if you create a habit of sleeping on a stone floor of a cave for 4 years, like going onto a mattress, you're gonna be like,
with palm frond pillows, and gauze made of seaweed.
But it helps to once again ground things in reality, where like it's not like how it would be in a TV show in the early 90s where like if you look at any episode of Star Trek Next Generation, we're like, oh, Geordi had his mind wiped, he became an assassin, but next episode he's on a date. So like in this, it's just like he's been back in civilization for a couple weeks, which makes sense because probably to bring him back from the brink of malnourishment and all that. But even still, that like it's not just getting back into the swing of things right away, because they even punctuate that by his friend saying to him in his last little farewell at the end of the party was like, we're going to bring you back to life now. But like it's not that simple. It's not as simple as saying it. It's going to take a lot of
and there's
time
like
and
people
effort.
talking about meetings and stuff, and he's just like,
Are you kidding me right now?
Fuck you.
Like we got to catch up on fishing. He's like, I've done all the
dead.
fishing possible.
Guys, we should do a little fishing. It's like,
Too
yeah.
soon,
Can I
bro.
punch these people? Am I allowed to? Or
And do you know what that does? That brings us to Jason's theory corner of the week. And do you know what my theory corner of the week is? It's so stupid. It's so dumb. So in this movie, we notice that Tom Hanks' hair, or Chuck's hair, gets very sun-kissed. Okay?
Unkissed.
It
Yeah,
grows
golden
out,
blonde.
It grows out, goes golden blonde. When he gets back to land, right? He cuts it off, and
Still has a
he's
little bit.
still got what we now colloquially know as as frosted tips. I think I posit that this movie is where the frosted tips phenomenon came from, and that's my theory corner for this week.
this movie came out in the year 2000, and I'm pretty sure NSYNC was popular before that.
Yeah.
We are your fire. That's the wrong.
I'm pretty sure that-
So I should say that I came up with this theory, assuming this movie came out in 1996 or 97. Right before the movie, I looked up the movie to do a post about it, and I was like, the year 2000. So this is assuming the movie came out in the 1997.
It takes place in 95, 99, though.
It does take place in the year
Back Before the
1995.
Bears and NSYNC.
Oh, maybe that's why my brain's broken about it, about the timeline. Anyway,
Could be.
Oh, I have a
and
question
that's
for you
been your
guys.
Mountain Dew, Perlator, FedEx, Panasonic, Jason's theory corner of the week.
Elvis.
Elvis theory corner of the week.
Was there any
I'm
significance?
Elvis and I love marrying 15-year-old girls. Isn't that how his music goes?
I think that was Woody.
That's most
No,
of them.
Elvis also married a 15-year-old girl.
That's most of them.
Oh,
I was-
God. Okay, was there a significance to there being 4 years later on the island and then 4 weeks later when he gets back to civilization?
I think they just wanted to have like a unified number. Unless there was some sort of like math thing that was going on throughout the entire movie that I didn't recognize, because there was like 3 hours and 4 minutes at the beginning of the movie, and like,
Yeah.
so I'm like, I don't know what the number 4 is significant to, but maybe there's something.
Well, I mean, yeah, and the idea of like it takes a month for the ship to pick up this guy, get some kind of story out of him. If they speak his language, verify what's going on, and make those connections. And then FedEx all of a sudden shakes awake and says, "Oh yeah, that's our guy." Meanwhile, he's staying at a hospital. So yeah, I would say that's where my mind was with the 4 weeks. Was just like it's not the next day. It's a little bit of time.
Yeah,
and
I mean they do keep using the number 4, and I don't know, and like who knows why. There's probably some weird reason. Robert Zemeckis divorced his wife and then married his like burlesque dancer wife a little while after that or some shit.
I married her 4 weeks later.
Yeah, 4
There's
weeks
4
later.
letters in Rita.
Rita. Yeah, my wife. You guys know that Robert Zemeckis like married a burlesque dancer and has cast her in every single movie since that wedding?
That's some John Carpenter shit.
Is that before or after?
And never as like an actor, just as like a like one of the people who wears like the motion capture suits and like the body capture. And his wife has giant breasts, and he has so many giant breasts in the movies. Crazy.
Except for Helen
Beowulf,
Hunt.
the movie that comes 2 movies after this one. There's like this one lady who's like, I want some freaking meat, and she's got like giant tits, and you're like, that's his wife. His wife is that person doing that. Like Robert Zemeckis is like, hey baby, you want to be in my new Beowulf movie? You gotta shake it.
Now, computer guy, I want you to get one thing straight. You better give her big knockers, or you're gonna get something coming to you.
And better than ever.
They better be the biggest tits you ever saw.
He's like a weird guy, man. He's just like a weird, horny man.
Well, that school of directors had a funny thing of dating their the kind of people they chose to date. Because like Steven Spielberg ended up marrying for a little while the lady from Temple of Doom, I think. All that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's always a funny history of these folks.
Weird nerds.
Lois Lane?
Like, these ladies like us now? Hold on a second. Ba-ba-ba-boom, ba-ba-ba-boom, ba-ba-ba-boom.
I got the perfect movie for you. But yeah, no, it's. But I don't know. I didn't find anything overly horny like that in Castaway compared to other Zemeckis movies.
In
Except
fact,
for
I'll
when
say
he
that
was
like
immediately horny when that redhead was like, "Hey, cowboy."
Oh, Jesus, Jason Voorhees over
That was
here wants
funny.
to murder a teenager.
Okay, let's take her home, buddy.
I called you Jason Voorhees.
I know.
The classic murderer of teens. No, I just wanted to say that like when I was younger and I watched this movie, that scene where Wilson flies away and is like, it's super emotional, and you're like, oh my god, his best friend is off to sea. It didn't really hit me in the same way as it did when I was a kid. I still got a bit of a lump in my throat, but I gotta say, like that scene where he goes to the house and they have that conversation and you realize that she never really gave up hope, and she like was tracking all the searches and stuff on her own, like outside of everything. And then
what a mind fuck that would have been.
That whole sequence is a mind fuck.
Yeah, she kept his car, and then
Because I didn't know
she
how
gives
the
him the
movie
keys.
ended. I forgot.
She gives him the keys, and then he pulls out his knife, and he's like, "Fuck! If I had this knife, I could have probably got out of there sooner," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he's driving away, and then they both have that moment where it's like, "You're the love of my life," and I can't believe that we didn't get to spend our lives together. But they both realize that they can't. Like, there's no way. Like, you have a husband and a daughter, and I am dead essentially. I'm like a zombie right now. Like, I have to leave, and you have to go back to your life. And it's like, it's very, very sad. It's an extremely sad thing to think about. And like,
because they still both have feelings for each other.
It's not that
Very
they just have
powerful
feelings for each other. It's that they were in love, and they were gonna get married, and they loved each other more than anybody else in their lives. And they know that they can't be together because they've already both broken off too hard, like a split end where the hair can't grow anymore.
Ooh, call back.
It's kind of devastating. It was more impactful to me this time than the Wilson death scene. I was just like, wow, this is like super duper sad.
Yeah.
I
More so
always
for Helen Hunt, I think, than for him. Like, I think that she was probably having a rougher time than him, because he was also convinced he was going to die. He was going to kill himself, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah. I also find in that part of the movie, one part that really gets to me is when he's apologizing to his best friend and Helen Hunt for not being there. That he says to him on the plane that, like, so you thought I was dead and you buried me, and then you had to bury your wife, and I wasn't there for it.
He had the empathy. He was able to have the empathy a bit more there.
Yeah, he's much more into
therapist in the world of volleyball with a bunch of fucking hairs stuck out.
But and then he, and then Helen Hunt says to him, "You said you were going to be right back," and he's just like, "Yeah," and he's like apologizing for it as if it was his fault that this happened. But like, and where a lot of people might immediately say on the surface, yeah, it wasn't his fault. Like, how was he supposed to predict that this plane was going to crash? But his choices in life were bringing him to that moment where he was constantly choosing career over personal life and losing touch with people. that something was about to happen regardless, to really tip him over the edge, and lose touch with everybody. And so it's interesting to see him taking this responsibility, that he's saying that like there's certain aspects of this that were really my fault. That if I managed my life better, if this were to happen regardless, then at the very least there wouldn't be all these loose threads left in people's lives as a result. So that's actually one part of the movie that I really appreciate watching as an older person now, of like taking accountability of your life and like your history. Because as we were saying that, like, she was saying that, like, I can't let you go, you're the love of my life, but they have to move on. But the only way to move on is to kind of acknowledge that, yeah, she was the love of his life. And that will always be the case, but the situation it just won't allow it anymore, and he has to move on. So that part of the movie also is like where the hammer hits the anvil for me.
Well articulated. I like that. I have a question.
That makes me sand. Sand makes me sad.
Makes me sand.
I'm just thinking about the island that's full of sand. 7 months old.
Lies.
Is that a lie? I'm pretty sure she's 7 months old.
I don't think they ever say it.
Well, she's in a high chair and she's
she looks
eating.
like she's like a year or two in the pictures.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Oh yeah, I'm thinking of an episode of Judge Judy I watched.
Let's do our final thoughts.
Yeah, she's too young to know what's going on, I think. But yeah, final thoughts. I feel like Tim just gave us like a really great final thought. But Tim, have you?
I'm not ready for final thoughts yet. I have a couple more questions.
Okay. Can I go to the washroom? Because I didn't know it was going to go this long, and I gotta pee.
I knew we were going to go this long because there was 4 of us.
This is almost a full hour over our regular time, and I know Jason's like getting mad.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Can I go pee?
You go to the bathroom. I got a few quick questions.
Okay, yeah, I'll be back.
First off, he gives her back the pocket watch. Where's his little box back from her?
Well, I don't know.
Whatever.
Next question.
Yeah,
Making out in the rain? Cheating? Question mark?
Well, a quick emotional affair. I was more fixated on the fact that they put Helen Hunt in a white shirt that immediately became see-through.
That was a little distracting.
Why?
Because
that you're right. That did not have to be in the film. It didn't lend or help with anything.
No, I think they used something similar.
That was the pervy part of Zemeckis coming out.
Did
I gotta get some.
Did everybody just want to see Helen Hunt topless in the 90s? Because they really they do. They make her wet a lot of times in movies.
I think you're right, actually. Now that you say that, yeah.
And Twister as well, yeah.
Yeah.
I did like how he drove her back up the driveway, though. Like, that was a nice little... Like, I've done shit like that before, where it's like, we're right there, but let me at least make it a little bit better or easier.
I wrote in my notes, it was like, oh, it's a sad ending. Oh, it's a happy ending. Oh, my poor heartstrings, it's actually a sad ending. Oh, yeah. He's going to find love with this new lady, potentially.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So another quick question. So the package with the wings, I believe, although I didn't notice any kind of markings on the box, but my Jason's Theory corner is it was a return to sender. It was the original package that she sent to the husband, now ex-husband, because he was with some other girl in Russia, and he sent it back to her.
Okay.
No, it's not. That's not true.
But like, yeah, they were leaving from Memphis when the plane crashed.
There's a specific point at the very beginning of the movie where the delivery guy who takes it from her says, "Oh, I see you used pink this time." Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Yeah, I did use pink." And then the package has yellow wings on
it. Damn it. Good call. Nice.
I made a note of that. And I was like, why pink? Why pink wings? And that was like the one that he gets.
Return to sender.
And then to touch on with what you mentioned earlier, Tim. So at the beginning of the movie, we see the archway with Dick Patina. And then at the end, that half is taken off and it's just the patina part still there. Love it. Chef's kiss. That's for you, Jason.
It's good shit, pal.
All right. Any other questions, Kaylin, or are you good to go? Do you guys think that her new husband was trying to get her to not talk to him?
I absolutely do 100%.
Yeah, he was trying to stop.
I think he made up that shit about her not being ready because as soon as he looks outside and sees them, she's crying so hard and being like, I should just go see him. And he's like, no. And I imagine
that maybe it's a combo.
I imagine him saying to her, he doesn't think he's ready to see you yet.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think that maybe she was like having a really hard time to go in there, and then he's like, let me go talk to him
take
first.
Care of this. Yeah.
And then,
yeah. And he might have been like more or less thinking of the right thing, but doing it the wrong way.
I also had a moment where they're kissing in the rain at the end, and their heads were blocking the house, but it kind of looks like the lights turn on, and I would have liked it to like
him coming in with a shotgun.
No, to sort of pan out and see him in the window, and then just show a little like still of him going,
or like through the
rain going on the window, and then it looks like he might be crying.
No,
and you
like
can't tell.
Yeah, like this kind of makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know, man. I think if I married a woman whose husband or like to be husband was lost at sea and he came back, I would have a lot of crazy emotions about it. But if I had a daughter with that person, I would trust in their ability to go deal with it on their own terms and not have to be like, you got to not talk to him anymore. He was on a desert island. He's crazy now.
It was basically
he could have eaten flesh, human flesh.
The 90s, though. Where did you get human flesh from?
I don't know. I would assume.
Al.
How else did he survive?
Yeah.
Pilot Al.
I got one more thing to add before final thoughts. It's a little technical thing. So I was watching. I immediately watched it with the commentary after watching it the other day, and they were talking about and again, this is what I mentioned earlier about like movie magic and seamlessness, and when you watch movies and there's water, a lot of the time you'll get water on the lens. They apparently use these like spinning discs or something on the lenses so that the water wouldn't be like, it would get like thrown off or some shit.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for humoring me, Jason.
It's interesting.
Well, Kaylin, why don't you just go straight into your freaking final thoughts over there, pal?
Well, are we sure we don't want to let Tim go first?
All right, Tim, why don't you give us your final thoughts on the movie Castaway, starring Tom Hanks, directed by Robert Zemeckis?
Well, outside of what I've already said, I was saying to Steve before we got started that I made a point to not look too much at other reviews or anything like that, where with the Mark Twain review, I kind of went deep into the paint for the behind the scenes, how they made all this stuff, because it is like a very different kind of movie, a different kind of technical movie. Whereas this one, when I rewatched it, it actually had a very different and also unexpected emotional response from me, where I kind of see where I am at this point in my life, and I was very much, imprinting that onto my viewing experience, and that really added quite a bit for myself. So I wanted to keep that contained more or less for the purposes of this show. So I thank you guys very much for that opportunity, because it ended up being very fruitful for me in that sense. And beyond that, I guess, one thing I am a little curious about is what was it that made you guys choose, if it could be answered quickly, what made you guys choose this film for this particular review?
Well, I had chosen 4 movies for this month that I deemed this month Isolation Month, where I wanted to choose movies where people were isolated in situations that they could not potentially escape out of easily or ever.
Ironically, you chose this, I think, before you had this month that you've sort of been going through.
Unironically, I did not.
Oh.
I changed my final movie because the final movie was going to be too similar to the other 3 movies we did. So we did Sphere. You've seen Sphere, Tim?
Yes.
Have you seen Sunshine, the Danny Boyle movie?
No.
Where they fly into the sun. They
It was
nuke the
also
sun.
good.
Oh, yeah. I know of it. I haven't seen it, though.
Okay. And then we did Event Horizon.
Yeah, which I know very well.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. So three movies where people are trapped inside of a steel hallway-based movie, drama, thriller, horror. And then I was like, and then the next one I was going to choose was Underwater, which I hadn't seen.
Okay.
And it would have been the same thing, I think, again, but maybe it would have been great, but who knows?
Did
but
you ever have Moon
on
this list?
No.
Okay.
I had a very specific list. Moon was on the list of things, but it was not ever like a contender because I don't really like Moon all that much, and Kevin Spacey needs to get the fuck out of all.
Oh yeah, I forgot he was in that. Yeah, okay.
Even acknowledging movies he was in, but and I decided like what's a weird isolation movie that we can choose, and I was like Castaway is like the ultimate isolation movie where he's so isolated that he has actually no one to talk to or interact with except for a volleyball. So I decided to like stray from the formula.
And we're glad you did.
I'm glad too. I think this was a great episode,
Underwater
even though it was
okay.
like an hour longer than it should have been.
It's our first 3.5 hour episode because we're not getting out of here until fucking 12.
Just for you folks. This is for you guys.
For you guys.
So Jason, why don't you give us your final thoughts?
Okay, I'm gonna make it short and sweet, my friends. Wow, Castaway! What a tremendously well-made film. From the effect of the plane crashing and its initial time on the island, to the time jump and the heartbreaking but hopeful ending, this film fires on all cylinders. I think it's hard not to give this movie my first ever legitimate 5 out of 5. Especially since I forgot just how well made this film is.
And this guy loves Event Horizon.
And I love Event Horizon. I've only seen it twice, though.
He's like, from the blood orgy to Sam Neill being covered in mysterious fucking slits at the end.
I don't like that first Deadpool.
The first Deadpool's a good movie.
No, not the first Deadpool movie. The first Deadpool introduction in Wolverine or whatever.
What the fuck are you Wolverine talking Origins?
He's got doesn't he have like, well, they're not cuts, but he has like lines.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're fired. That's horrible.
Jesus Christ.
You don't ever talk about Wolverine Origins on my show again.
Helen.
I would also give this movie kicking Wilson out the window out of anger, but realizing how much I would miss him if he were gone.
Yeah.
What went well? Just all of it. The whole thing went well. Even better, honestly, I might go so far as to say as we remember this is one of the great 3-hour-long Tom Hanks movies, not unlike a Forrest Gump. And I don't know if that's full 3 hours, but you know what I mean. And have just a little tad, just a little taste, or same runtime, shorter ending, just a little bit more of a in between those 4 years. Just want to know a little bit more about those 4 years. I know to you guys, I knew you were going to have that reaction, Steve. I know it's a lot like the blood orgy shit that we get. We wanted more of that. Me and Kay.
Yeah, it's exactly like the blood orgy from Event Horizon. I wish we got so much more of that.
I wanted more blood orgy. I wanted more space hell.
People getting their boobs ripped off and shit.
I wanted more space hell last week.
Scene.
I just wanted more misadventures. Make some webisodes. If it was far enough into the future, make some webisodes about his time.
They do like the Thor style webisodes
Exactly.
where it's just Tom Hanks being like, "Oh, I finally got my laptop working here. Hello, can anyone hear me? Hello,
Exactly.
Rita."
Exactly. So that's basically. But hey, this is a milestone for we're well over 100 episodes.
Oh God,
now.
I forgot my password. Wilson.
Oh, it's Wilson.
My password. Oh, God, what is it?
This movie's perfect, and I love it, and it's a 5 out of 5 for me.
All right. Tim, do you? I know you kind of did like a really good one, but do you have any like final thought. We do like a what went well, what could have gone better sort of thing. If you have any, I know you already kind of gave us a good sort of solidified thought at the end there, but
I can't imagine any changes that could be made that wouldn't get in the way of other very important things. I am a big fan of function in movies, so you don't. Sometimes there's more often abandoned art than completed art, and for a reason. And I can't imagine adjusting anything on this that wouldn't hurt anything else. So I'm very, very happy with it as it is, and we'll sleep comfortably, giving it also a 5 out of 5.
Whoa, that's 2 5 out of 5s.
Mm.
Helen, you have a 5 out of 5 in your pocket?
I never do numbers, but I will say this.
I give it 5 coconuts out of 5 coconuts.
This movie is great, and I agree with you guys that it's perfect. It's, as far as a movie is concerned, it's perfect. It's grounded in reality. The attention to the little details, the setup and payoffs, like you were mentioning, Steve. I also want to say that the sound design needs a standing ovation. I mentioned earlier the word seamless. It is seamless. So a lot of the beach scenes, a lot of that shit is ADR. They had to redo all that shit. A lot of the wave crashes, the palm trees waving or whatever, all of that shit is was sound design. And
you can tell too, like all of Tom Hanks's dialogue is re-recorded because it was too loud. Yeah, the waves.
You could hear it too clear, but it still synced up perfectly, and it made me think of a story. I forget the names or whatever, but it was something about like a king, and he was like trying to hire like a new artist or some shit like that, and there was like 2 artists fighting for the spot, and it was like, okay, we'll do a competition. You guys both show me your best work, and then I'll pick the ones or whatever. So they're at the day of showing the art, and so there's 2
art
canvases
day is upon us.
It's upon us, and there's 2 easels of canvases with curtains over them before they show what they've done. The first guy opens his curtain, shows his thing. It's like, okay, very nice, very nice. And then they go to the second guy. It's like, okay, show us yours. And it's like, you're already looking at it. They didn't know that the curtain or whatever was already the art. Like, it looks so real that they didn't even know that they weren't already looking at it. And
what a twist.
So again, like, that's what I thought of how seamless the movie
Helen
magic.
Is the M. Night Shyamalan.
That was pretty good. That was a good. I didn't know where this fucking story was going. That was good. I liked it.
I try.
I liked
that.
I liked it.
Thank you. The Tom Hanks and Helen Hunt are cast perfectly for this. They're all like kind of like everyday people, so to speak, like as far as just like their kind of looks or whatever. And I'm not saying that, good or bad or whatever kind of thing, but like there was like, it didn't overshadow the movie itself.
It makes the movie better that 2 people who look like they would be normal people on the street
Meg
are
Ryan.
just in the movie. Yeah.
Make it a trilogy.
Also, honorable mention to
Did you get my email?
Wilson out here acting half of Hollywood. Fucking give him a fucking Oscar or whatever. Okay, now my writing starts to get kind of small. When Island look. Okay.
When Island.
No. I got it.
You didn't write Island. You wrote
No.
Island?
I got it. So my what went well. Tom Hanks' transformation, like his Survivor Island look / Wilson. My even better. This is a little bit of a nitpick. Well, I have 2. The whale took me out of it, unfortunately. I really wish they had like a real whale or something. I feel like there was a better way to have done that. There was one other thing though.
Really hard to train blue whales to do anything because it's impossible. Actually, they've never been able to do it.
If Star Trek Force taught us anything,
I'm just saying it. So there's one other thing though. So at the end when he's at the crossroads, the four points or whatever, we see him looking north and his shadow is going west. Then we see him looking from the north, looking south, and his shadow's going east. A little bit of continuity error.
I would never. I don't even know your brain
Christ,
could do
Kayla.
that.
He's like, that's a real nitpick.
Yeah,
It's like a crazy person nitpick.
I didn't even know.
So
They're like, I think this Kalen fellow might be a genius, or he's a madman. We must track him down now before he destroys the United.
Before he destroys the United States or Germany or Russia.
all that being said, this movie is a buy. You may not rewatch it as frequently as other movies, but it is perfectly executed and you will enjoy it every time. I give this movie finding the strength to keep going, keep pushing forward, keep surviving, even if you're cast away. Tomorrow, the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide will bring?
Wow.
Also,
I think you just like you're like read
37,850.
all of the movie poster quotes like at the same time. Like Prestige magazine says, "Follow the horizon." Sunset magazine says, "Who knows what the tide will bring."
Cinephile magazine says.
I know that that's what he says at the end of the movie, but yeah,
A real.
When you say it in the way that you said it, it sounded like they were all individual quotes. The first one I thought you were gonna say it's a real Finding Nemo. Oh wait, no.
Survive your way to
Dory.
Castaway
Oh shit!
this
Fuck.
summer.
All right, sorry, Kalen. Do you have a couple more things to say?
MPAA 37850.
All right. Very good work.
Yeah, Tim. We started. Kalen got fixated on the MPAA rating, so he's been.
He
Doing
likes detective work at the end of the movie. He's got his magnifying glass at the screen. He's like, when are they gonna?
The complete Al does not have an MPAA.
There's one or
rating.
two that don't have it so far. And it
Yeah,
drove me
because
crazy.
those ones aren't real movies.
Hey,
Uh,
hey, come on.
I mean, it's my turn now.
It's your turn.
And I do have like a big affinity for Zemeckis movies and for Tom Hanks. But I do think this is one of those movies that, as Kalen said, it's something that even if you don't own it, it's something that you maybe should watch every once in a while because it fills you with like emotions that you forget about, and you have those sort of iconic images in your mind of what the movie is, but you lose what the movie's about. And I don't think that I would ever recommend this movie to anybody and feel weird about it while they're watching it. You know, like when you recommend a movie that you really like, and then you're like, well, you know, like you got to think about this part though. You know, I think I could recommend this to anybody and they'd be like, holy shit, this movie is like pretty heavy and good. And like,
Yeah,
it's clearly
you wouldn't have to add a caveat to it. Yeah,
no, you could just be like, just watch this movie and you'll probably like it. And you probably won't want to watch it for another 10 years, but you will maybe like it. And I kind of like almost want to slap myself on the wrist for not watching this again sooner since I was a kid. I think it's great. I think it's great. It's you know, we do lots of movies on this, and I say that lots of movies are great, but I don't mean it for a lot of them. I mean it in the way that I'm like, I like it, so you should like it. But I'm like, I like this movie, and I think anybody can like this movie. I don't think there's anybody, unless you're like a supreme narcissist who's like, I probably could have made a fire immediately. Like that's the kind of person that's like, all right, don't watch Castaway then, you psychopath. But like, I think that most people to watch this movie would find it extremely endearing and interesting, and you would probably think about the fact that like, I might die like 3 days in, like I break my ankle and be like, oh, what am I supposed to do? There's no doctor here. Or like, you know, like not be able to figure out how to get food. But then also like emotional distress where you're like, I miss my family and my friends, or like my loved one. It's full of stuff that, even if you are looking at the surface level of it being a person trapped on a desert island, which is how I watched it as a 13-year-old or whatever, I still found it emotionally compelling as a 13-year-old, and I found it even more emotionally compelling as a 36-year-old or whatever, and for completely different reasons. Which is almost like I don't think I could recommend Big Trouble in Little China to a 13-year-old and like a 60-year-old woman and expect them to have the same experience while watching it. But like, this is one of those movies that you could potentially do that with. I think it's an extremely good example of Tom Hanks's ability to act, and the fact that 90 minutes of the movie is reliant on his physical performance and facial expression just to give us what the emotions were meant to feel. Like, there's no score. We talked about this throughout, but like, the fact that there's no score is that you are almost completely reliant on him being like, oh, and you're like, oh god, he's in Tom Hanks mode and it's amazing right now.
Is it?
Not to mention like Zemeckis' ability to bookend a movie in a way that the beginning of the book is a little bit lighter than the end of the book, but they feel equally as valid. It just takes a little bit more time for you to understand the end point. And I think the end of the movie is like super hopeful, considering everything up until that point is distressing and sad. Where like, imagine if you lost everything and came back and realized that like you might get it back only to have it be removed from you again. And then you realize that maybe there is more. And that's like the whole point of him saying like, see what the tide brings or whatever. Right. And, so his tide is like, well, maybe I'm the tide. And he's like, I'm going to bring these skates and the volleyball and the package to everybody. And he's the tide. But then even in him being the tide, he sees another tide coming at him, with that woman being like, you look lost. And like, that's his next tide, man. That's so good. And he's definitely going to her house, and they're going to talk and have some coffee. And I don't know.
Make some
might
baby.
be amazing. Maybe that's Rita. Who knows?
That too.
So yeah, I don't know. I think this movie is amazing. When it comes to my rating, I think my rating is imagine he immediately used that shitty rubber raft and got over that first wave, and then was just like, ah! And like there was an oil rig right there, and he's like, ah, I did it. That's what my rating is.
Credits.
He immediately got to the oil rig. That's how I feel. Movie rules. Yeah, Kaylin, go ahead.
There was one last note that I wanted to mention. He uses underwear elastic waistbands to keep his shirt thing on his head.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I did have like other questions I wanted to ask, but we kind of got way too deep into like it's now officially 1 hour later than we should be at this point.
I enjoyed it. Can we get one more question? What about one more question?
Well, no, it can't, because it's gonna take forever for us to answer it. Yeah, it's okay. If it's for all of us, the question was gonna be: you crash on the island, you have all of the FedEx boxes with what's inside them, and like, how long do you think you last? Do you think you last forever? What are your survival skills? Like, that was going to be like the question.
For Steven and for Jason, I'm Kaylin.
Yeah, see, this is what I mean.
Yeah, for our
it
viewers,
would take forever.
Leave a comment below to answer Steve's question.
Yeah, maybe we do a follow up to this at one point. So, you got a rollerblade, a regular skate. So,
introduce every person.
Yes. For Jason, for Kaylin, and for Tim, our guest, my name is Steven.
For Kaylin and for Steven and for Tim, I'm Jason.
For Jason, Steven, and our good friend Tim, I'm Kellen.
And for Kaylin, for Jason, for Steve, I am Tim.
And I got one question for you guys. Hey, have you seen this one?
It's my impression of Wilson asking that question.
I get it.
Hey, you see this one? Oops, this one.
Tim, take us home, buddy.
Oh, me? Hey, did you see this one?
Jason, say something funny.
We do need something funny to go out on, though. So if anybody,
That's not flying. That's falling with style. No.
Oh no, sorry guys.
Okay.
My wife just walked into the room. Rita, come back. No, we're almost done the podcast. We're just discussing the end of the movie where you and I battle with
Elvis.
knives on top of the mountain.
Played Elvis's manager.
Did he?
Yeah. The recent Elvis movie. Yeah, he plays his manager. He plays the general. What was that guy's name?
I think that's his nickname.
Oh, right. That's in the trailer where he goes, "You're gonna marry a what? A 15-year-old?"